This happened back many years ago. I was in high school in the early 2000s, and one night my parents went out. They left me and my older sister at home, so it would just be the two of us at the house for dinner. Now, at the time, my older sister was 17 years old and I was 14. We lived in a house in a pretty typical neighborhood. Our parents left us some money to order a pizza or something, and that was the plan. When it got to be like 7 p.m., I told my sister that I was hungry and we should order from this one pizza place that was my favorite. She agreed, and then she called the store with our order. Around 20 minutes later or so, we were just in the living room watching TV, and the doorbell rang. My sister got up and answered with the money that our parents left us. I was like half paying attention as I was more focused on the TV. I heard my sister answer the door and the pizza guy say hello and stuff. I remember that I heard the pizza man ask my sister if she was home by herself, and she replied just saying no. The man said something like, "Oh really?" He couldn't see me from where I was in the living room. The guy said something else, but I couldn't really hear it. I heard my sister respond, but couldn't really make out what she was saying either, but it sounded like she was talking in a kind of rude way. I looked over at that point and saw that my sister appeared kind of annoyed. She handed the money to the guy, and then as he was still saying to have a good night, she slammed the door in his face. Then my sister locked the door as soon as it was shut, sighed, and started walking back over to the living room. I asked her what that was all about. She said, "I forgot about that creep." She went on to say that she was at her friend's house like 2 weeks prior, and the two of them had ordered a pizza. The same delivery guy was the one to show up. I guess that he acted really creepy, trying to flirt with my sister and her friend, and he even asked to come inside the house. They practically had to yell at him to leave and slam the door in his face. She said that she was planning to not order from that pizza place anymore because of him, but forgot about it. I thought that was weird, but I was glad that he was gone now and we had the pizza. I remember that just about 20 or 30 minutes later though, I heard a noise outside. It sounded like a car door closing. I looked out of the living room window and I saw the same pizza guy walking up to the house again. He had a small box in his hands and I wondered why he was at our house again. We hadn't ordered anything else. I warned my sister and she got up and said that she was going to call the police. Before she could though, the man started ringing the doorbell again. My sister and I ignored it at first. Then there was a knock on the door. My sister walked over to the door, did not open it or anything, but yelled at the man to go away. He yelled back from the other side, saying that he brought her a free brownie. She said she didn't want it and was going to call the police if he didn't leave now. What the man said next really creeped me out. He said that he knew my sister was alone and asked for her to let him in. That's when I knew I had to do something. This guy apparently really thought that she was home alone. I stood up and walked over to the door. Then, trying to sound tough, I yelled really loud in my manliest voice that I was also home and that I was going to come out and beat him to a pulp if he didn't leave. At first, I thought it didn't work. The man said something like, "Who's this tough guy?" He still stood around on the front step and didn't seem too affected, as my sister was now dialing the police. The guy laughed a little, as if trying to sound like the whole thing was a joke to him. Then, he finally turned and started walking off. I remember that he walked back to his car and then got in and drove away. The police still came to our house a while later though. My sister made a report and then the cops went to his work. I heard that the man later got fired. Thankfully, he did not come back to our house again after that. I'm glad that I was home that night and was able to help out my sister. The guy was a total creep, and hopefully he didn't harass anyone else like that. A few years ago, I attended a sports game and ended up forgetting my phone there in the stadium. I just know that when I got back, I couldn't find my phone. I had lost it and didn't have any idea as to where it was at first. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not even 100% sure that I did lose it at the sports game, but that was the only thing that made sense to me. I know I had it at the game, and when I got back, I did not. I don't recall using it at all on the way home. So I live in an apartment and live by myself. It's maybe 15 minutes from the sports stadium where the game was. After losing my phone, I was devastated. However, I figured that there was nothing that I could do. I actually called the sports stadium, and they do have a lost and found there. However, after describing the phone and where I was sitting, they said they unfortunately did not have it. The next morning, I was lost without my phone. Like most people, I use it every day for almost everything. So I started looking online for a new one. I didn't want to just buy a brand new phone with how expensive it is, but I also knew that I couldn't go that long without a cell phone. Now, that night, I still hadn't bought a new one as I had been doing research into deals online. I had made up my mind that I would just cut my losses and get a new phone the next day, because I didn't really see any deals that were that great. I would go to my service provider and tell them what happened. However, at like 11 p.m. that night, there was a random knock at my front door. I went over to the door wondering who was there. At my apartment, I really never got knocks on the door, so this was already strange, but with it being so late at night, it made it even more weird. I went over to the door and looked through the peephole to see that nobody was there. So then I carefully opened my door. When I did not see anybody in the hallway, but I did see a phone on the ground at my doormat. It was my cell phone. It seemed like a miracle and I couldn't believe it. I picked it up and took it inside. The phone was just how I left it. Somebody must have found it and brought it back to me. I didn't know who it was, but I was very grateful. That is, until the strange things started happening. I went onto my phone and saw that some things were different. Like, for example, there were some new photos and videos in my camera roll. There were a bunch of pictures of the street at night, and the videos appeared to be taken by somebody just walking along the street at night. I couldn't see anybody in the videos though, or the pictures, so I didn't know who it was who had found my phone. And then there were some either screenshots or downloaded photos from the 1990s live-action Ninja Turtles movie. It was really strange. Then there was this phone tracking app that I didn't have before. I didn't know what it was, so I deleted it. But that wasn't it. Starting that very same night, I started getting a bunch of random phone calls. At first, I did not answer because I didn't recognize the numbers. But then they called again and again. I eventually picked up only to be hung up on. And it wasn't just one number, there were several different numbers calling me. I would answer sometimes and either be hung up on or just hear silence on the other end. Sometimes they would leave messages too, but the messages would either just be long periods of silence or be just breathing noises. It was really strange. I started to block all the numbers. There were probably 10 of them in total, and it took like a week of blocking to get them all. Eventually, it finally ended. I'm still wondering who brought my phone back. I mean, I'm grateful that they did, but also what did they do? Was it all just a prank, or was somebody trying to scare me? I think they got my address and stuff because they were probably able to get into my phone. My passcode was 1234, but I have since changed it. I work at Walmart, and this is something that took place not too long ago. At Walmart stores, you can shop online, and at our store, there's a bunch of parking spaces dedicated to online orders. When somebody orders online, they can drive to one of the parking spaces, and somebody who works at Walmart will bring out their items and put them in their car for them. This was one of my tasks at Walmart occasionally when this story took place. I would bring out the orders and put them in the people's cars in the parking lot. We had almost an entire row of parking spaces in the lot dedicated to this. Each had a number, so we knew which car to bring the orders to. One night, I was working and doing this for a while. After a few hours, things started to really quiet down. I didn't have nearly as many orders to bring out. At one point, I saw there was just 2 cars parked in those rows. I brought out an order and went back inside and did not get another one for at least 20 more minutes. Then I had to bring one out, which was pretty small, so that was a little strange. I was used to the orders being like 5 or 10 bags of stuff. This one was just one small bag. I didn't really think too much of it though, and was just glad that it would be easier. I got the car and parking space to bring the order to, and then I left the store to bring it out. When I made it out there, I remembered that this was one of the 2 cars that I had seen there during the last order. They must have gotten there really early. It was a dark gray, older looking large SUV. The windows also appeared fairly tinted. I walked out there and headed to the driver's window. I was planning to just hand them the bag. Before I made it there though, I saw the window roll down just a crack. I couldn't see the driver, but I heard a man's voice say, "Put it in the trunk." The window then rolled back up quickly. So I stopped and then walked around to the back side of the vehicle. At that point, I got to the rear hatch and swung it open. As soon as I did, I saw that there were no far back row of seats in the car. Instead, there were these 2 guys wearing all dark clothing and masks covering their heads. One of them came up and quickly grabbed me and started trying to pull me into the car. My instincts took over and I started tugging back, trying to get away. The other guy also started pulling me inside the car without leaving the car. It was 2 against 1, but they did not have great leverage being inside the vehicle and me being out of it. We struggled and one of the guys put his arm around my head. He covered my mouth so that I couldn't scream or yell for help. It felt like a really long time that the struggle was going on. I really don't know how long exactly it was, maybe a minute. I remember that after what felt like forever, I heard footsteps a ways away. Then I heard a man's voice shouting from behind me. After a few more seconds of struggle, I was let go. In fact, I was pushed back and I fell to the ground about 5 feet behind the vehicle. Then the trunk slammed shut and the SUV quickly screeched away, squealing the tires in the process. When the car was gone, the man's voice who I had heard came up to me. He asked if I was okay and what had just happened. It was an older guy who must have seen what was going on and came over. I told him that the guys had just tried to pull me into the car and I didn't know why. The man said he was calling the police and then went inside the Walmart store with me. I told my manager what happened, and within like 5 minutes the cops were there. I talked to them for a while, but I couldn't give them a license plate or a description of the men because they were wearing masks. After that, I was able to go home. It was a very terrifying experience. I don't do that at Walmart anymore, but I still work there. I don't think those men were ever found. Looking back, it's eerie to think of how I had noticed the car long before the order was made, and the fact that the order was so small. Were they just sitting there planning to kidnap me when they saw me working? I'm also really grateful to the man who saw what was going on, or they might have been able to get me in the vehicle. A couple of years ago, I had to go to the airport one night to pick up my sister. She was flying in from Detroit, and the flight was supposed to land fairly late. I think it was like 10 or 11 p.m. or something like that. However, her flight ended up being a little bit late. I arrived at the airport somewhat early, but my sister wasn't back yet. I went and parked the car in a parking lot and then went inside of the airport. When I got inside, I found the time that my sister's flight was now supposed to land, and I had about 20 more minutes to wait. So I went over and sat down. By now, the airport was very quiet. There were just a few people walking by here and there. As I sat down and waited, I remember that at one point I saw this woman randomly walking up to me. When she approached me, she asked me how to get to the city from the airport. Now the city was like 5 minutes away, so I told her, and it was pretty easy. She walked away after that in another direction. But then the woman stopped, sort of near another sitting area, but did not sit down. I wasn't really watching her, and I mostly went on my phone. A while later though, I looked up to see the woman just staring at me. She was standing in about the same spot. Now, she was a long distance away, but there was still no mistaking that she was looking in my direction. I found it really odd. I looked away though and focused my attention back on my phone. The woman continued to stare at me though, because the next time that I looked up, she was still doing it. I didn't know why. I had thought that she had to get to the city. After all, she had asked me for directions, but now it seemed as though she just wanted to stare at me creepily. I just ignored it for the most part though. Soon my sister's flight had landed. I got up and walked over to go wait where the bags would come out. I walked a little ways away and located it. Then I stood around for a while and waited for my sister. A short time later, she came out and got her bag, and then we started to leave. As I was walking away, I saw the woman in the airport again, still staring at me. I thought it was weird, but I just ignored it. I looked away and left the airport with my sister. We walked out of the airport and went towards the parking lot. I remember that when we got to the parking lot, I looked back and noticed that the woman who had been staring at me was now in the parking lot as well. She was walking behind us a good distance back. I was very confused now. Who was this woman? Why did she keep staring at me? And what exactly was she doing? She seemed to be walking sort of fast, and as we were walking to the car, I told my sister about the woman. The parking lot was very large, so it was kind of a long walk. As we continued, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to just ask the woman. I stopped and turned around to face her. Then I started to take a couple of steps towards her. As soon as I did though, the woman stopped suddenly. Then she turned around and sprinted away in the opposite direction into the end of the parking lot. It was so weird. I stood there watching until she went out of sight, and I had no idea what was going on. But then I just continued with my sister towards the car. We eventually got there, loaded my sister's bags in the back, and then got inside. As I started to drive away though, I was still in the parking lot, and I noticed this car come driving sort of fast into the lot. It went in front of me, and I caught a look at the driver. It was the same woman. I could not believe it. She was driving a pickup truck, and drove around my car sort of recklessly. She ended up driving around and going behind it, and I left the parking lot hoping that she would keep driving the other way. But this woman screeched her tires and quickly turned around. As I left the parking lot, she started to follow me. I drove down the road, leaving the airport with the woman still behind me. Soon I turned, and the woman turned as well. She drove behind my car down the next quiet road for some time. We were about the only two cars out because it was very late at night. When I turned onto the next road, the woman made the turn very wide. She ended up going off the road and sliding a bit before hitting a tree in the grass and crashing. The crash really was not that bad, but I pulled over and stopped to call the police. After crashing, the woman got out of her truck and then went into the woods nearby. I was very confused. The police arrived at the scene fairly quick, and I told them what happened. They searched the woods and pretty quickly located the woman. We were able to go home after that. I later found out that the woman was high on drugs. She obviously should not have been behind the wheel of a vehicle, and that explained her reckless driving. That also explained why she acted so strange. I have a Costco membership and have had one for almost 10 years now. In all my years and many trips going there, there is one memory that really stands out. It's by far the craziest thing that's ever happened when I've been there. So I went to Costco one afternoon to do some shopping for the week. This particular week I didn't need as much stuff. Normally I will stock up and buy more things. It happened to be a weekend, so when I walked into the store it was extremely busy. People were everywhere pushing their carts and it was tough to navigate the store. I slowly made my way in and out of the aisles. I got most of the things that I needed within a good 10 or 15 minutes. I remember that I reached the end of an aisle and there was a little display with my favorite brand of water. It's not the only water that I drink, but I drink them away from home and take them with me places. There were just a few packs left and most of them had been bought. There was also another place in the store where they had more of this water, but this was just a display at the end of the aisle. Anyways, I took a few packs and put them in my cart. Like right after I did that, I looked up and I saw this guy who was pulling 2 carts around. I noticed that in one of his shopping carts, he had literally like 20 packs of the same water that I got. When he saw the waters that I had, he nearly ran me over with one of his carts, which was also overflowing with stuff. He took all the remaining waters off the shelf, tossed them into his cart, and then noticed me. He called out to me as I was starting to walk away. I stopped and looked back at the man. The guy had really taken shopping in bulk to the extreme. He had 2 overflowing carts, which had maybe a total of 5 products in them, meaning he pretty much bought out the store of each item that he had. So I asked him what was up, and I saw him looking at the waters in my cart. He said that he noticed I got them and asked if I wouldn't mind giving them up. I looked at all the ones that he had and I said, "Why do you need so many?" He told me to mind my business and then asked again if he could have them. As he was asking, he was already walking to my cart and started to reach out to grab them, as if he expected me to say yes. I was ticked off by the man's overall behavior, and I said no, I wouldn't give them up. He stopped, looked really surprised, and then asked why. I told him to mind his business, then I started to walk away. The guy started to follow me with his 2 carts, but it was too hard for him to keep up with me pushing all that way. Plus, the aisles were really crowded, so he couldn't maneuver them as well as me with only 1 cart. I had almost everything that I needed by that point, so I finished up and got the last few items and then headed to the checkouts. I got there, then paid for all my items and started to leave. Things were still extremely busy. I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Then I began to unload the bags of items into the trunk of my car. As I was doing this, I was not really paying that much of attention to my surroundings, I guess, because when I was reaching into the cart, suddenly I saw this man walk right up, seemingly out of nowhere. I hadn't noticed him nearby or approaching. It was the same man from the store. He reached into my trunk, grabbed the packs of water that I had, and then started sprinting away. I was so angry and I dropped what I was doing and chased after him. He was faster than me though and also had a head start. His car was parked not that far away. He literally got into the car, tossed the water in, and then slammed the door shut. I got behind his car and I was going to try to get him to give me my water back. The man violently started his engine and backed out really quick. When he did, he came within about 6 inches from running me over. I had to jump out of the way. And to be honest, I don't think he would have cared if he did run me over. All that just to get even more of that stupid water. I really think that guy was just obsessed with stocking up on his favorite brands. I went inside and reported him to Costco. I could only give them a description though. They contacted the police because he almost ran me over, and I spoke with them as well. I told them the car description and the man's description. I'm not sure if anything was ever done about it though. I've been to the Costco many times since then and have never seen him, so maybe he got banned or something. Looking back though, I still can't believe that happened. As a 19-year-old female, I was looking for a room to rent in the city I was moving to for college. It was about an hour away from my family. I wasn't having much luck, so my mom started to help me look for a place. She found an ad on Craigslist for a room for $300 in a house with everything included. The homeowner was a man, and he rented the additional rooms upstairs to other women while he lived in the finished basement. The ad stated that he rarely saw the other roommates because he had a kitchen and his own entrance downstairs. The ad also said he preferred women because he had issues with male roommates in the past, partying and causing damage. We decided to take a look because it was the cheapest we could find in the area. My mom and I went to the house to view it. It was a decent house in a decent neighborhood. The man opened the door and was very welcoming. He was middle-aged, and the kitchen and living room were furnished nicely and clean. My mom loves to talk to people and get to know them, so they engaged in conversation while I stood there quietly and observed the place. He then said that he would show me my room. We headed towards the staircase to go up, as I thought, since he said on the phone my room was upstairs with the other roommates. But instead, he opened another door and we followed. He took us down to the basement and opened a door to a very small room with no closet and no windows. He proceeded to say that this was my room and I would be sharing the bathroom in the hallway with him. Also, his bedroom did not have a door on it. I was definitely thinking absolutely this was weird, but my mom and him were so deep in the conversation I could not interject. He led us upstairs and showed us the other rooms which had the doors open and said they were all currently being rented by women. He then started telling us elaborate stories about the other women, not very nice stories describing drinking problems and crazy ex-boyfriends. My mom was listening intently, but I took the time to investigate further. I looked in all 3 rooms and bathrooms. There was furniture, but not a single item in there that looked like it belonged to a woman. No clothes or anything. All the doors to the bedrooms were open, had neatly made beds with dark wood bed frames, and had bare mirrors and nightstands. There were sliding mirror closets, and they were empty except for one had men's clothes hanging pushed against one corner. Nothing was on the nightstands other than a lamp, and nothing was on the bureaus. I went into the bathroom, and there was nothing on the vanity other than hand soap. I looked in the showers, but nothing other than bar soap. The bedroom on the left had an empty suitcase lying in the middle of the bed. He seemingly had no problem with me creeping around his supposed tenants' rooms without their permission. My mom stood there listening to him. I don't know if it was sheer distraction or if she didn't want to be rude by not listening, but either way, I don't recall her having a good look around those rooms. After seeing all this, I came back onto the landing and started slowly heading down the stairs. They were still talking and absent-mindedly followed me down to the living room. My mom had mentioned when we arrived that she and my dad were going on vacation the next week, but I couldn't go because I had to work. He brought up again that I should come by next week and have dinner with him and the roommates to see if we would all get along. I said sure, and then we left. As soon as we got in the car, I told my mom I would definitely not be living there. She was dumbfounded. I had to explain to her not only did he lie about the room I would be in, and I was not supposed to be in the basement with him and share a bathroom with him, but I also had to explain to her because she was so busy talking that she didn't notice how nobody else had lived there, at least no other women did. She still didn't get it and thought I was just being paranoid and thought he was nice, and it was a cheap deal. I had to explain to my stepdad and get him to tell her that by no means would I be living there or even going there for dinner. I tried to report the post, but by the time we got home that day, he removed it. I think he planned on doing something if I went to dinner that night. My instincts were telling me that it was most likely a human trafficking situation, as it seemed as he wanted to lure women into living there, especially with the mention of how the other tenants were female. However, based off the bedrooms and bathrooms that I saw, there was no way there were any other women living in that house. I hope that no other woman decided to live there or even went there to look at him or went to dinner with the man. I was a 14-year-old boy when this happened. I usually felt safe at home and didn't think much about danger or anything like that. My parents were out for the evening and wouldn't be back until very late at night, so the house was mine for a few hours. Wanting some company, I called 2 of my friends and asked if they wanted to come by. They both said yes and told me that they would get there at around 6 or 7 p.m. respectively. I watched TV and messed around on my phone to pass the time until my first friend arrived. When he got there, we talked for a bit, and then we headed out to go wait for my other friend at the park down the road. There we would meet him on his walk over from his place. I locked the front door, put the keys in my pants pocket, and we headed off. We waited at the park until about 7:30, but my friend ended up canceling on us. After standing around for a while and getting bored, we decided to head back to my house. When we got there, I reached into my pocket to grab my keys, but they weren't there. I checked all my pockets again and started to panic a little, thinking I had lost them somewhere. Before I could say much, James tried the door and it just opened. It was unlocked. We both just assumed that I must have left the keys inside on the side table and accidentally forgotten to lock the door, even though I was almost certain that I had locked it. The keys were exactly where they usually were. We shrugged it off and just went inside. For the next few hours, we played Xbox, talked about random stuff, and didn't think much more about it. Around 10 p.m., James said that he had to head home, so I walked him to the door and locked it behind him. Not long after he left, I went to grab my phone and realized that it wasn't where I had left it. I found it on the floor, and the screen was smashed into pieces to the point where it was unusable. I figured James must have knocked it off accidentally and didn't want to admit it, especially since he left in a hurry. Annoyed but tired, I went upstairs and laid in bed watching TV. About 10 minutes later, it occurred to me that if my phone was broken, I should probably make sure that the landline was nearby in case I needed to call my parents. I went downstairs to look for it, and that's when I found it broken as well, in pieces behind the couch. That's when I completely lost it. I started freaking out, ran out of my house, and sprinted to my neighbor's place. I was shaking and basically begged them to let me use their phone. I called the police, and when they arrived, they searched my house. That's when they found a very small-sized man hiding inside my bedroom wardrobe holding a 10-inch knife. My parents were called immediately, and when they arrived, they just held me while I cried. I must have thought I dropped the keys in my pocket when I left for the park, but accidentally dropped them on the ground right outside my door. The whole experience taught me a lot about safety and being aware of my surroundings, lessons that stuck with me later in life, especially after having more encounters with creepy people. One night, I had gone to the supermarket really late. I was just getting a few things, and the store was not that far from my apartment. In fact, it was probably only a little over a mile away. So I went there and then left to go home. By now, it was after 10 o'clock at night, and the roads were virtually empty. I made it almost all the way back. I was on this road that's pretty busy during the day, but not at night, and I came to an intersection. The light was red, so I came to a stop. No other cars were really around me, and all I had to do to get home now was drive a really short ways up the road, take a left, and then my apartment complex was off that street. As I sat there at the red light, I noticed someone going from the sidewalk to the crosswalk in front of my car. It was a younger-looking man who had blonde hair, and he started walking across the road. Right when he had made it about in front of my car, he looked over at me. I expected him to just keep walking, and at first he did. But then he turned suddenly and then went to the left and started running towards my car. He sprinted all the way there, got to my driver's door, and tried opening it. It was locked, and the guy then began banging on the window before I just hit the gas and took off. The whole thing really took me by surprise. The light was still red, but I didn't even care. Nobody else was coming from the other directions. As soon as I started to drive away from the guy, I saw him turn, and I looked in my mirror, and he started sprinting the rest of the way across the crosswalk, now crossing the street. I drove up the road and then turned to the left, and soon I arrived back at my apartment. I parked in my parking space and finally felt safe and realized that I should probably call the cops and report what happened. It seemed like an attempted carjacking. So I took out my phone and dialed 911. I sat there in my car and told them what happened. They said they would go investigate, and after I ended the call, I left my vehicle to go inside my apartment. However, as soon as I got outside my car, I noticed something off in the distance. A man was jogging into the apartment complex, and I realized that it was the same guy. He had just continued jogging down the side of the road after he crossed the street, and he was now at my apartment. He was looking at me and running straight for me, so I quickly started running from my apartment to get inside. I was easily able to get to the door well before him, and I looked back and saw that he was a lot closer now, but he was still probably about 50 yards away. I tried to unlock the door, but my key fob didn't work the first time, which happens sometimes and is annoying. But it was especially frustrating in this situation. I tried it again, and thankfully it worked on the second try. I quickly got in and shut the door, still with some time to spare. Then I walked away, and soon after heard the man trying and failing to get inside. I walked up to my apartment and then called the cops again, letting them know that the man was now chasing after me at my apartment. The police came to my building, but the man was gone by then. He probably ran off someplace else. I gave the cops all the information that I could. That was a really crazy situation. I still don't know who that guy was or why he seemed to randomly go after me. It was one thing to go after my car, but another to run all the way to my apartment building and continue to try to get me. What were his plans? I'm glad that I never saw him again after that. I used to be a pizza delivery driver. It was a job that I had for about a year when I was younger. The pizza place that I worked for was pretty good. I enjoyed working there. I remember that we had this one customer though that got banned from ordering from us. He would often call and order pizzas to his house. Then he would act really creepy or rude to the delivery drivers. 3 different ones had all reported him, sometimes multiple occasions. So our manager ended up banning him, and there was literally a note on the wall saying not to accept his order, because he would try calling and ordering, or ordering online, and we wouldn't let him. A couple of times after he was banned, some of his orders got through because we had forgotten, and that led to more complaints. I personally never had to deliver to him, but I heard from the other drivers that he was just not nice at all. I guess he cursed out one of the delivery drivers for no apparent reason once. Another time, he called one of the drivers a curse word, and then another time he tried to get one of the delivery drivers to enter his house, and when they said no, he literally tried to pull her inside. We ended up getting a new manager hired though, who was part-time. His name was Andy, and overall he was cool, but kinda bossy. One time when I was working as a delivery driver, he gave me a pizza and an address and told me to deliver it. I immediately recognized it as the banned address. I took it up with Andy, and I told him how the guy was banned and we weren't supposed to deliver there. Andy said that he had already took the order. He said, "Look buddy, just do one more delivery there for me." So it was apparent that I had to go, so I took the pizza and then left. I was kinda mad at Andy, but I was also curious how the creepy man would act. I figured maybe I could just give him the pizza, get the money, and leave without a problem. How hard could it be? If he wanted to yell stuff at me for whatever reason, he could go right ahead. I didn't really care. I didn't know if the guy was just a grouch or if he enjoyed being rude to people or what. Eventually, I arrived. He lived in what looked like a pretty typical neighborhood. I took the pizza, got out of the car, and then walked up to the front step. Before I even reached it though, the guy opened his front door and was looking at me. He looked to be in his 50s or so, had dark sort of long hair and a handlebar mustache. He also had an open can of Miller Lite in his hand. "Who the F are you?" he called out as I was walking up. I said, "I'm the pizza delivery driver delivering the pizza that you ordered, sir." He then told me to just give him the pizza already and shut up. So I walked up to him and handed him the pizza. I could smell the strong smell of beer as well as cigarettes coming from inside the house. I told him the price, and the guy said, "You expect me to pay for this crap?" That's when I got worried that I wasn't going to get out of there with any money. I told him, "Yes, I need the money." The man then said that he had the money inside his house, and I could go and get it if I was brave enough. I thought about it for a moment and thought, no, I don't think I am. But then I realized that I really needed to get the money or Andy would get mad at me. So I tried to do a compromise and I asked the man to go get the money for me. He said no. Then I reluctantly said that I would go get it. The man stepped back and I entered the house. It was very cluttered. There were boxes and beer cans everywhere. I stayed just inside of the door. The man then said that the money was in the basement. At that point I thought, heck no, and I turned around and just walked out. The man started saying something, but I didn't even care. I ran out of his yard and back for my car. He was yelling at me the whole time. I got in my car, left, and drove back to work. When I arrived back, I was furious with Andy. I told him that the guy was totally insane and we never should have took the order. Andy asked for the money, and I said how the guy didn't pay. Andy started to give me some kind of new employee orientation lecture about how I have to make sure I get money from the customers or the business will lose money. That really ticked me off. I literally started yelling at Andy that the guy was trying to get me to go into his basement. It got heated for a moment, but Andy ended up understanding, and after a conversation, he was cool about it in the end. After that, we never delivered to that guy again. I live alone in a house that I'm currently renting. I don't know any of the neighbors at all. It's a populated neighborhood where the yards are small and there are many houses in rows. Not too long after I moved in, one time I ordered something online to be delivered. However, I never received it, even after it said it had been delivered. Nothing was there and I had no photos of the delivery from the company, so I assumed that it must have been sent to my old address or something by accident. If that was the case, I would not have been able to get it as that was too far away, so I decided to just order it again. A few days later, when it was delivered, I didn't know it had been delivered yet, but it was there. I was upstairs on the second floor of my place when I noticed something through a front window. I saw a woman exit the house directly across the street from mine. She then walked through her front yard and basically made a beeline to my front yard. She then proceeded to walk right through the yard and up to my front step. I was just standing there watching her, and I don't think she knew I was there because she never once looked at me. I thought that she was going to knock on the door, but for what reason I did not know. She went out of my sight when she got up to the front step because I couldn't see that from my angle. But instead of knocking on the door, I saw her then come back into my view seconds later, walking away and holding a package. I realized that was my delivery and she was walking away really fast. My neighbor had just stole my package. I took off running out of the room and down the stairs. When I got to the front door though, the woman was already across the street and entering her house. By the time I opened the door, she had just got inside. I marched right over there and then banged on her front door. Moments later, she answered it, looking all confused. She was opening the door just a crack, like she was all defensive, and just stuck her head around the corner. It was like she was ready to slam the door shut at a moment's notice. I told her that I just saw her take my package and steal it. The woman then claimed that it was her package and it had been delivered to my house by mistake. Not knowing 100% if my package had in fact been delivered yet, I stopped and thought for a moment. She got me to actually doubt myself there for a second. But then I told her that I had just ordered a package and it was supposed to be delivered that day and should be there by now. The woman told me once more that no, it was hers and that she knew nothing about my packages. Then she said that she had to go and slammed the door shut and locked it really loud. I then went on my phone and checked my email. Sure enough, it said that my package had just been delivered about 30 minutes earlier, and there was no package there now. I knew she had stole it. So I then banged on the door and told her that I knew she stole my package. She didn't answer though. I tried to reason with her. I yelled from the front step that if she could show me the package with her name on it, I would leave her alone, but she still didn't answer. I stood there knocking on the door on and off for like 10 minutes, but she refused to come to the door again. I was so mad. I didn't want to do anything crazy, so I cooled down and then calmly walked back to my place. That explained why I didn't get my delivery the first time, because she had stolen that one too. I realized that I needed to figure out how to stop this woman. I thought about calling the cops, but then decided to give her one last opportunity to come clean, because after all, calling the cops on a neighbor can start a whole mess, and she probably wouldn't get in that much trouble for stealing one $30 package from me twice. So I went back to her house the following day. As to be expected, she did not answer, so I left a note. It said, "I know you stole my packages. You have 48 hours to come clean before I get the cops involved. Sincerely, your neighbor." Well, later that day, I got a knock at my door. I thought that it would be the woman, but when I opened it, it wasn't her. It was some man. I'd never seen him before, but he said that he was the husband of the woman across the street. He said that she was terribly upset because I had accused her of stealing, and he knew that she was innocent. He tried to lecture me about making a false police report and accusing others of stealing. I tried to tell him my evidence, which was clear as day, but he would have none of it. He stormed off, claiming that if I got the cops involved, he would, quote, "make my life miserable," whatever that means. Now, I should have just gone to the cops right then and there, but that encounter made me want to try to catch the woman in the act. So I went out and bought a security camera and positioned it on my front step. Then I ordered a package and purposely left it out for several days. However, I got no luck. I realized that she probably saw the camera, possibly even saw me installing it, because the camera only showed the front step and then part of the front yard and driveway. It didn't reach the street or the neighbor's property, so she very well could have been on her way over to steal again and then noticed it. I tried to hide it, but there were really no great hiding places to make it impossible to see. But at least this would stop her from stealing in the future. For a few weeks, things were fine. I never saw her or her husband or anything. I decided to just let the matter go, as angry as I still was about it. Then, one night, I arrived home pretty late. When I did, for whatever reason, I glanced over across the street. There was one light on in a front window. I saw the woman just staring at me from inside with this angry look on her face. She was just glaring right at me. When we made eye contact, she didn't look away or anything. I turned away and then walked inside. But when I got to a front window in the house and looked out, I saw that she was still staring at my house. She was just glaring at it with an angry face. It was really creepy. She remained like that for about 10 minutes. Then she finally moved away and covered her window. I guess that she was pouting because she couldn't steal any more of my packages. That was the last time I saw her. I haven't seen her or her husband since then, and that was almost a year ago now. I'm not aware of them moving out, as the same car is still in their driveway, but I haven't seen them in any capacity. That's probably a good thing, and I probably won't live here too much longer as I'm looking at places across town. I hope that I never see that woman again. This is something that happened a couple of years ago, but has stuck with me, and I still remember it from time to time. It's something involving Instagram, which is obviously a very popular app and is one that I use regularly. At the time of this story, I would go on Instagram just about every day. Most of my friends and I followed each other and had for years. We would like and comment on each other's posts and things like that. We would also post stories almost every day. Every now and again there would be bots or weird people on Instagram, but it didn't happen too often. And when it did, you would typically just ignore them or maybe block them at most. Everything was usually harmless. They would maybe leave a weird comment or try to follow you, but overall nothing that strange had happened. One time though, I remember that I saw an Instagram notification that I had a message request. It said it was from my same name. This confused me, and I opened the app to see what was going on. You see, I don't have a very common name. It's not like super unusual or anything, but it's not very common. When I went in the Instagram app, I saw that this account had my exact same first and last name, and the profile picture was the same profile picture that I had. They were requesting to message me. The only difference between this account and mine were the amount of followers and people they were following, and obviously the username as well, because two people are not allowed to have the same exact username. It was a very similar name to mine though, but just off by an underscore or period or something like that. Anyways, I accepted the message because I was curious as to who this was. The person simply said, "Hi." I clicked on their profile and it had no posts, was only following a few people, and just had a few followers. None of them were people who I knew or recognized. I responded asking who this was. They responded pretty quickly back to me saying, "I'm you." Now, this was an unusual behavior for a bot, and at this point it seemed more likely to be a prank, but I didn't really know anybody who would do something like this. I asked, "What do you mean?" They simply said again, "I'm you." I was fed up and I closed Instagram and then got off my phone. I thought to myself, that's enough internet for today. However, hours later when I used my phone again, I saw that there were multiple Instagram messages now. They were all from that same account. The account just kept saying "hi" over and over again. A few times it said things like "answer me" or "respond now." I finally went back on and responded saying, "What do you want?" Soon after, the account simply sent me a link. I didn't know what it was, but I was hesitant to click it. Sometimes links can be viruses or scams of some sort. I did not know what this could be, because the link was just a bunch of random letters and numbers it seemed. However, my curiosity ended up getting the better of me and I clicked on the link. It took me to this archaic looking web page. It looked like those websites from the 90s that don't have much design and use Times New Roman font. But this web page was all white and had several headings of text and small paragraphs after them. Then there were photos, and the web page appeared to be all about me. There were pictures of me, mostly taken from my social media, but some were taken from other places, such as my friends' pages or even when I was in a school newspaper. It was like a biography of me. It said my name, date of birth, my parents, siblings, and where I was from. It said every school that I went to as well. It was almost like a Wikipedia page, but more archaic looking and less organized. And I'm not famous or anything, so this was really weird. When I saw it, I was totally creeped out. Whoever made this really took a lot of time to put it together. I left the website and sent another message to the person demanding to know what this was all about. But this time, they didn't answer. A short time later, I went back on Instagram. Except now, surprisingly, the person had blocked me. I was now so confused. I tried to find the account again, but could not. After that, there were no more strange messages or anything like that. I never saw that account again, and I never found out who was doing that. I live by myself in an apartment building. I've lived here for about 5 years now, and it's a pretty nice place. However, I have to park my car in the parking lot because there's no kind of garage or indoor parking structure. This is kind of annoying at times because in the wintertime it gets really cold around here, and it's a little bit of a longer walk to where I usually park. So anyways, one time last winter we had a really cold stretch. There was some snow on the ground and everything was frozen. It was super cold, probably about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I drive a car that's old, so I usually have to go out and start the car a lot in the cold to make sure that the battery doesn't die. On this night, I didn't have to go anywhere but decided to go out and run my engine. I would try to run the car at least once a day. It was late, maybe almost midnight, and I had forgotten about doing it earlier. I had not driven the car that day as I was lazy and door-dashed food, so I figured that I had better go out and run the engine and just hope that it would start. I bundled up and put on my warm winter coat as well as put on my winter gloves and hat. Then I left my cozy and warm apartment on the 4th floor and went down to the 1st floor and then left the building. I had to walk through a side yard to the apartment building and across the exit road to where my car was. The entire walk, I could feel just how cold it was outside. It was windy too, but it was so cold that it was hard to breathe. Finally, after probably less than a minute, but what felt like a lot longer due to the cold weather, I arrived at my car. When I got there, I went inside and started the engine. Thankfully, it just barely started up. When I was running the engine, I would usually sit in my car for like 10 minutes and make sure that the engine got warm. It would be freezing in my car at first, but when the heat finally started to kick in and things got warmer in there, it meant that the engine was warm and I could go inside. After starting the engine, I sat there shivering, too cold to move. This was going to be a long 10 minutes. I didn't feel like going on my phone to pass the time, because in order to do that I would have to take my gloves off, and I was just too cold. So I sat there looking around and watching my breath. As you could imagine, the apartment complex outside was a ghost town, especially at this hour and in this cold. But then I surprisingly saw someone. It was a man walking down the sidewalk past the apartment building and heading in my direction. He was not wearing a coat, but just a sweatshirt and jeans. He didn't seem bothered by the cold. I watched him continue to walk down the sidewalk slowly and look around. Then when he got to my car, instead of continuing down the sidewalk and passing by, he cut into the snow and went off the sidewalk. He crossed over and started to walk right towards my car. He must have seen my engine running or noticed me. However, I had no clue what he was doing. There was no car parked directly next to mine on either side, but I still figured that he was probably going to a different parked car. However, the man stopped right by my driver's window and then knocked on it. I was really confused as to what he wanted, but I went to roll my window down anyways. However, the window was frozen shut, so it didn't move. I instead opened the door a crack and felt all the cold air rush in. I asked the man what he wanted. When I did, the guy said that he needed to borrow my car real quick. This was not good. He didn't even ask for a ride, he just said he needed to borrow it. And he said it in a kind of demanding way, not like he was asking nicely if he could. Right away, my instincts told me to close the door and get away from the guy. Without answering, I just quickly ducked back inside the car and closed the door. The man reached out and tried to grab it, but thankfully it's still shut. The man then tried to open my door, but I was able to lock it just in the nick of time. The guy tried opening it a few times, but then turned around and angrily walked off. I didn't know what that was all about, but it seemed to me like the guy was going to try to steal my car. I watched him walk off, and then he went back down the sidewalk towards my building. I continued to sit in my car and wait for it to warm up, but when the man got kind of by my apartment door, he stopped. He just kind of started standing around and not really doing anything. He didn't go into the building and he didn't walk past it. He was just kind of loitering around there. I tried to just ignore him, and I slowly got warmer and warmer in my car. The car was starting to not be so freezing, but the entire time the man did not really move. I was getting concerned because I would have to leave my car and walk right past the guy to get inside. Unless, of course, I used another entrance, but even then I would still have to possibly partly walk by him, so I didn't know what I was going to do. I stayed in my car just hoping that the guy would leave. After probably like 15 minutes, my car was nice and warm inside, but the man was still there. I wanted to go back inside my apartment now, so I turned off the engine to my car and opened the door and left. My idea was to attempt to go into another door, but to take a longer route, going behind cars in the parking lot. If I could do it right, maybe the man would not see me. However, when I got outside, things were completely silent other than the wind. So as I walked through the parking lot, I glanced over and saw the guy still standing by the one door. But then I noticed him start to walk towards me. He must have heard me walking and noticed me. I know that I would never make it to a door to the apartment before the man reached me, so I turned around right there. Then I started walking back towards my car. When I arrived there, I went inside and started up the engine again. I looked up and saw the guy walking towards me again, but he was still kind of far away. I didn't waste any time, and I put the car into reverse and backed up. Then I left. A little drive would probably be good for the engine anyways, so I left the apartment and just drove around random streets for a little while. I drove around for probably 10 or 15 minutes and then went back. By the time I made it to my apartment again, I didn't see the guy at all. So I parked, got out of my car, and then quickly walked back to my apartment door. Thankfully, I was able to make it. I went inside and got to my apartment just fine. I haven't seen the man since. I'm not sure why he was out there in the cold or what he wanted from me. I think he was going to try to steal my car, and I'm really glad that he finally left. I've been a long-haul truck driver mostly in the western US for about 10 years now. I don't get spooked easy, but one night a couple of winters back, something happened that stuck with me ever since. It was early winter, maybe 35 degrees outside. I'd been driving for hours, and at around 2 o'clock in the morning, I pulled into a vista point near Mammoth Lakes to sleep a few hours. No other vehicles were on site when I arrived. After about 30 minutes, I woke up needing to pee and stretch my legs. I climbed out, lit a smoke, and stood there watching my breath in the cold. This stretch of highway was quiet with no lights, no houses, just black mountains and an empty sky. That's when I noticed a light out past the pull-off, maybe 200 feet away. A flashlight beam moving around all over the place like somebody was searching for something. It wasn't pointed at me as it was just sweeping on the ground. I remember thinking, what in the world was somebody trying to do out there at this hour? There was nothing but brush and rocks. I watched it for a while, finished my cigarette, and climbed back into the cab. Out of curiosity, I flipped on my marker lights, thinking maybe whoever it was would see that I was there and not wander too close. The second my lights came on, the flashlight froze. It turned right towards my truck for a quick moment, and then a second later, it went out. I sat there for a bit, waiting for it to come back on, but it didn't. Finally, I decided to get some more sleep. About an hour or two later, I woke up again to a strange sound. Somebody was banging their hands along the side of my trailer. Not hard as if to get my attention, but just walking the length of my trailer, palms slapping the metal at a steady rhythm. I couldn't see anything out the window, the fog was too thick. I decided to step out and check it out, as I knew it was probably the person with the flashlight from earlier. When I opened my doors and got out, the slapping of the trailer stopped. The sky was pitch black, no moon out that night, just the stars. The only light came from my truck's orange markers, and they were bright enough to throw my shadow across the small trees and bushes. I stepped out, walking all the way around my trailer without seeing anyone, and just finished up when I heard rustling off in the brush. I turned towards it, and out of the dark, a figure stepped forward that looked like a man. I said something along the lines of, "Hey, leave my truck alone, I'm trying to sleep." Suddenly, the man turned his flashlight on and blinded me by pointing it straight into my face. Before I knew what happened, I was tackled and driven into the ground. The man started to try and hit me in the head with his fists, and he landed a blow or two before I was able to kick him off and scramble back to the driver's side door of my truck. The man wasn't far behind me, and as soon as I got into the truck, I had to open my door, slamming it into the man to subdue him before I could get the engine started. The door hit seemed to connect fairly nicely with him, and he stumbled backwards onto the ground and took his time getting back to his feet. I was able to get the truck into gear and drive out of there before he could do anything else. I don't know what that night was or the man's goal. I'm lucky that he didn't use a knife, otherwise I wouldn't have stood a chance. Perhaps he just wanted to steal my truck without killing me. I'm not fully sure of the reasoning behind the random attack. Back in the 90s when I was in high school, I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. One of the jobs I did was working for a guy doing remodeling projects, like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects. I went to school during the day, of course, and would sometimes work after school or weekends. For the guy I worked for, it wasn't uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do alone, mostly demolition work. He picked me up one Saturday morning as I didn't have a car or license yet, so he would pick me up and drive me to sites for work and then leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews as they were the more skilled laborers, so I would tear up the place before the main crew would come in and do all the remodeling. Here's the part that was my major downfall to this story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars or something. It took a long time to get to the site, and as we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert. I knew we left the highway and went down a few other 2-lane highways for a long distance, but I had no idea where we were. I had a big jug of water with me because the water to the house I would be working at was off. When we pulled up to the house, I pulled all my tools out of the truck before he left, and he then drove to another site that he would be working on. He told me that he would be back to pick me up at about 5 or 6 p.m., since it should only take me until then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, "I'm only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then." It was never unfair, and we always had a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I was at this property all alone. I walked into the house, and it was mostly empty. My job was to remove all the remaining furniture, contents, and appliances, remove all the flooring, gut the kitchen and bathroom, and remove all the wood paneling. I was used to being on sites alone and working all night, and this was in the daytime on a Saturday, but the house kind of gave me the spooks. The house was old, dark, musty, and kind of cool inside, the kind of cool that gives you the goosebumps. I started removing all the junk from the house as I normally did on a project. I tore up all the flooring next, and to my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease, and it was rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using the big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically, so by late afternoon, I was down to my last drink and had already ate everything I brought. No worries though, because I would be getting picked up in a couple of hours. I finished all my tasks and even swept the entire place so the next crew could get right to work later that week. At that time of year when I was out there, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but you know in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. My ride was running late, so all I could do was wait. This was the time before cell phones were common, and there was no electricity, water, or phone service in the house. I climbed up to get to the top of the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I could see something in the distance. Miles down a smaller road, I saw a few homes, but those homes were all dark. My first thought was to hike down to a neighbor's house and ask them to use a phone. I didn't want to leave though in fear of missing my ride, especially since it didn't look like anyone was home since no lights were on in any houses. I started to think about my options as darkness approached fast. My options were either to stay at the house until morning, hike what little water I had a few miles in the desert at night, or wait until early morning and hike out there to some sort of civilization. I decided my best option was to just stay and hope that my ride would show up. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was either. My family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night because they knew me and how much I would work, and they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, but luckily the moonlight was bright. It was getting cold outside, so I went back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even more creepy when mostly empty. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of a little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed an old wooden chair and just sat in the living room of this house doing absolutely nothing except waiting. I started to hear the wind and odd noises, which I assumed were animals in the distance. I started to shiver from the cold, and my mind might have started to play tricks on me. I saw shadows moving outside and inside the house. I also started to hear someone talking, like whispers or something. I was sure I was going crazy and got up from my chair and yelled out hello, and just as I did, I heard something fall on the other side of the house. I had enough of this creepy house, so I went to go outside again. At least in the moonlight I could see better. Off in the distance I heard noises and saw movement, but couldn't make out anything. I had a pile of tools by the edge of the house ready for when my boss picked me up, so I ran over there and grabbed a heavy pry bar. I was ready to defend myself for whoever was out there. I had to keep moving, because my undershirt and flannel shirt were not enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and as far as I could see, there was no lights around me. I didn't want to try to make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I got up on top of the gate just to try to gain a little bit of height to see if I could see some house lights nearby or car lights. My mind went to the stories that circled around at the time, about people who would come up to the Mojave Desert and bury bodies, how there were evil groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding. I knew no one was in the house, but I was sure I could hear noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch for warmth, looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone at any moment. By around 11 p.m., I looked at my watch, thinking this was going to be a long night, as all this stuff only happened since it got dark. I didn't know how I was going to make it for another 6 hours until daybreak. Closer to midnight, I was wide awake. My eyes were only fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down and maybe they could help me. I remember casually turning around to look back to the house, because all this time I kept hearing noises, but I told myself it was a rat or some animal. I saw a shadow of a person moving from the kitchen to down the hall. I jumped up from sitting and started backing my way out of the porch away from the house. As I was backing up, I tripped over the debris pile and fell down on the ground. I tried to get up, but fell again. It was like something pushed me down, or my imagination, but all of a sudden these bright lights were coming closer to me as I was laying on the ground. I saw my boss standing above me with a flashlight, wondering what I was doing on the ground. I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad. I just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me, and they thought he was coming. So no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along the house I had got, and that's when they realized I was still out there. My boss felt really bad and told me he was going to pay me for the entire time I was out there. As he was driving me home, I asked about the house and told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house and only just knew what we were supposed to do. I don't know if I was going delusional or something, but that time I spent out there by myself, lost in the middle of the desert at night, was the scariest night of my life. What was so weird is I never saw any headlights of a car approaching. My only memory of being rescued was seeing my boss standing over me with his flashlight. I'm not exactly sure what happened that night, but it was so creepy. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, a flashlight, and double the amount of liquid with me. I used to work at Walmart many years ago. This was about 10 years back now, and I was much younger at the time. It was one of my first jobs, and overall it was okay. What I mostly did in my time at Walmart was to push the carts in the parking lot. This job might seem easy, but it actually got pretty tough sometimes. For one, I lived in a climate that got pretty cold, and I would be outside in the winter. But also, so many people shopped at the Walmart and used the carts that it was hard to otherwise keep up. The other workers that would push carts would always call in, and I would be stuck all by myself in the whole parking lot. At my Walmart, there was also some crazy drivers, which made pushing a bunch of carts in at once a challenge. Still, I feel like I did a pretty good job most of the time. One of the other problems that we had sometimes though was that people would not put the carts back where they belong. There were a good number of cart returns. Sometimes they would fill up and overflow, and other times people would just not put the carts back and leave them scattered around the parking lot. And even occasionally sometimes people would steal the carts. So one night I was out in the parking lot working. The weather was nice, so that was good. I was working until like 10 p.m. or something like that. At around 9 o'clock, things were pretty quiet. There were not as many customers at the store anymore, and I had just gotten the carts full again. So now I had a little more time, and I was going around the parking lot and getting the stray carts. I collected several from one side of the lot and then went to the other. When I was at the east side of the lot, which was generally the quieter side, I saw a man pushing a cart. However, the cart that the man was pushing was empty, and he was at the far back corner of the parking lot starting to go off the property. I was wondering if he was going to steal the cart. He didn't look homeless at all or anything, and again, nothing was in the cart, so I wasn't sure what he was doing. I started to walk over towards the man. He kept going and was soon off of our property. He went into a parking lot that was next to ours for some other business that was closed by now. In that parking lot, it was almost completely empty, but there were a few cars scattered around. There was also a U-Haul type truck that was parked there. The man kept going towards the truck. When I had finally caught up to him, I called out to the man. I asked him what he was doing with the cart. The man completely ignored me and kept going. When he made it to the truck, another man got out from the driver's seat of it. He met the other guy, and then right in front of me, as if I wasn't even there, they went around and opened the back of the truck. I asked what was going on, and the men glanced over at me, but I was once again ignored. Then they lifted the cart into the truck, which I could see had some other junk in it. After that, I yelled at them to stop and said that they couldn't do that. The men looked over, but still ignored me. I was angry now and felt disrespected. I started walking over to them, and they shut the door to the back of the truck, and then started walking to the front of it. I got in their way, and they kind of shoved me. When this happened, I thought about trying to fight them, but I thought better of it. I went back to the other end of the truck and then tried to open the back door to get the cart, but it was locked. Then they started to reverse the truck, nearly hitting me, and I just barely got out of the way on time. They quickly drove off and were gone. It was very weird. I didn't know what on earth had just happened. I went back to the Walmart and just kept getting carts after that. When my shift was over, I reported the stolen cart to my boss, who said, "Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Tonight you lost." Something about the guys who stole the carts though seemed really strange. How did they just completely ignore me? And why did they even want to steal a shopping cart in the first place? For the most part though, I decided to forget it. I kept on working at Walmart. A few nights later though, I was working again. It became another quiet night similar to the one before. I was walking around the parking lot and collecting carts towards the end of my shift again. Then I saw that same type of U-Haul truck. Of course, I didn't know for sure if this was the same one as before or not. There are probably many trucks that look just like that around. Still, I was curious. The truck was parked in the far back corner of the parking lot at the end row pretty much by itself. As I walked over there, I decided that I would go and see. I got closer and closer and then approached the truck. I was heading for the passenger side front window. As soon as I got within maybe 5 feet, I could see the same two guys were inside. The truck suddenly took off, very quickly driving away. It was the same truck with the same guys. But what were they doing just sitting there? Were they planning to steal another shopping cart? I'm not sure. After that, I didn't see those guys again. So maybe they went to a different Walmart to steal carts from. I'm not sure, but it was pretty strange. Last year, on New Year's Eve, I went out to a few bars in the city with friends. We all live in apartments that are pretty close by, some closer than others, and most of us walked and met up at a bar sometime in the evening. There were about 8 of us that night in our group, all women, and we've known each other since high school. That night was a lot of fun. We went to about 4 or 5 different spots, and we stayed out until almost 2 o'clock in the morning. With it being New Year's Eve night, the city was very busy with people going out and celebrating. At the end of the night, nobody was super drunk, but we all had been drinking. That's one of the main reasons that we chose to walk. And most of the places are not that far, maybe 10 to 20 minutes. Mine happened to be the farthest away. I had considered taking an Uber, but I walked with my friends instead. It wasn't that bad of weather. It was a little chilly, but not too cold. When I said goodbye to my friends where their apartment was, it was on the way to mine anyways. My place was now only a little less than a 10-minute walk from there. So I walked down the sidewalk and things quickly went quiet. I didn't live downtown, but very close by. Still, my neighborhood was quieter and not as well lit. When I was walking down the sidewalk, nobody else was around. But I had walked to and from the city many times before, so I wasn't too nervous. Not long after saying bye to my friends, though, I heard footsteps behind me. They were a good distance back, kind of far, and at first I ignored them. But as I continued to walk, it seemed as though they were getting closer and closer to me, and I was not walking super slow or anything, so I decided to look back and see who was there. When I did, I saw a man who was about 20 or 30 feet behind me, and he was looking right at me. He had a short beard and dark hair. When I noticed him, I started to turn back around, but he waved at me. He then started walking even faster. He spoke and said hi. I stopped and turned around and said hi back to the man. It made me feel a little bit better that he was friendly. He caught up to me and said that he saw me at the bar earlier that night. I had not seen him, but the bars were all pretty crowded. I asked him which one, and he mentioned the last one of the night that we were at. He then said that he happened to live over there as well. We made some very small talk about basic stuff like the weather as we continued on. However, much of the walk, the conversation, and the guy's overall personality seemed really awkward. Soon, I arrived at my apartment and started walking towards it. I said goodnight to the guy, but he was still walking with me. He then said that he lived there too. It seemed odd because I had never seen him there before, but I believed him because obviously I didn't know everyone who lived at the place. I just thought that it was a coincidence. So when I went to the building though, I unlocked the door and the guy walked in right behind me. Then I walked over to the elevator and he joined me there. By now this was seeming really awkward. When I arrived at my floor, the man also got off the elevator there. I had never seen him on my floor before, much less in the entire building. When the elevator stopped, I offered him to get off first, but he waved me to go off first and then followed me. So he was now walking behind me as I went down the hallway to my apartment. When I arrived at my door, I said goodnight to the guy once again, and he said goodnight back. I breathed a sigh of relief when he continued walking down the hallway. I realized that I guess he did live in my building. After getting back home, I was pretty tired, so I pretty much started getting ready for bed at that point. But in the middle of my nighttime routine, it was interrupted by a knock at the door. I walked over quietly, wondering who was at my door at this hour. I did not open it, but looked out the peephole. The same guy was there. I still didn't answer, but kept watching him. He stayed around my door, but did not knock again. He was just hovering around there for like a minute or two. Then, finally, he walked away. I was really creeped out. But after that, I never saw him again. Never in the building or around it. It is my belief that he did not live there. That's why he walked in the door after me. I never saw him get out a key or anything. I think he just pretended to live there. A couple of years ago, I was asked to watch a friend's house because they have a cat. I live about 15 minutes outside of the city, but my friends live another 20 minutes even farther out. It's my friend and his wife, and they have this house that's like way out in the wilderness. I'm not sure why they live in such an isolated spot, but they like it. When you go up that way, it very quickly changes from city landscape to rural. I had been to their house several times before, so I knew their cat, and I knew the overall layout of the place and stuff. It's got a really big yard, which is nice, and they have people over a good amount. So I guess that's one of the good appeals. But there's a ton of woods, and the driveway is super long and narrow. Anyways, they were going out of town for a couple of days and asked me to stay in their house. I told them that I could, and I had to take care of the cat and then water the plants that they had as well. Overall, it was pretty easy, and the cat had a litter box, so it wasn't like a dog where I would need to let it outside. I just had to feed it and make sure that it was behaving and that sort of stuff. So I drove up there and met my friends, and then they left. They gave me a key, and I was going to be living in their house for the next few days. It felt way out there. The driveway itself is very long, like I mentioned, and you can hardly see the street from the front window. The home is also kind of up on a hill. The nearest neighbor is down the street a good ways, so it feels very private. Also, their backyard is massive, but it's totally surrounded by woods. There's a clearing of maybe the size of an acre where they have mowed grass in the backyard by the house, but then it's just dense woods in almost all angles. I know that they own a good amount of woods going straight back, but I'm not sure exactly how far. The woods appeared to just keep going and going. So after they left, I hung out until it was time to feed the cat, and then did so. Overall, the cat was behaving pretty well to start out. He was like most cats though, a little bit unpredictable at times. So when it got to be a little bit later, I decided to get some food. I didn't want to eat my friend's food, and I'm not good at cooking at all. So I was going to leave the house and then drive to the nearest town to see what was there as far as food. However, the sneaky cat for some reason decided to run out behind me. I hadn't even noticed it, and as soon as I opened the door to exit the house, the cat ran right past my feet. He left the house and then darted out into the backyard. Now, I knew that he was not an outside cat, so I began to panic. He was not supposed to go outside, and I was responsible for him. By now, it was completely dark out too, but thankfully the cat is mostly white, so he's easy to see in the dark. He ran into the backyard like he was chasing after something. Maybe there was a squirrel, I don't know, but I took off running after him, calling for him to come back. Cats are not like dogs very much, so calling his name didn't make him turn around and run to me with open arms. Instead, he completely ignored me and kept running farther into the backyard. I saw that he was heading for the tree line of the woods. I was just running as fast as I could after him, saying to myself, I'm screwed, I'm screwed, I'm screwed. I could not be responsible for losing my friend's cat in the wilderness. I was determined to catch him. The cat ran right into the woods, and I ran after him. There was no path there, and I got whacked by all kinds of branches. I could still just barely see the cat running through the trees. At one point, not too far into the woods, he stopped. I thought that he was finally giving up. When I got near him, I slowed down and called out his name. He looked right at me, dead in the eyes. I got down on my knees and called out to him again. He just stared at me, and we were like 10 feet away from each other. He did not move. Then, as soon as I moved forward, he turned and bolted away from me, going farther into the woods. I chased after him and he slowed down, but wasn't really running that fast. I think if he was going his fastest at that point, I would have definitely lost him. It was like he was kind of wandering around and exploring, but also aware that he was being chased by me, so he was exploring at a fast speed. He didn't seem to want me to catch up to him. I called his name a few times, but he ignored it. He went farther and farther in the woods, and I continued to chase after him. Then, finally, after like 5 minutes, which felt like a lot longer, he stopped again. This time, I did not stop and try to call him to me. I just kept going, reached out, and grabbed him. I was able to pick him up, but he hissed at me. I almost let go, but did not. Now I finally had him. Thankfully, he didn't scratch me, as he was fairly used to being picked up. Now I just had to get out of there. Except I was in the middle of the woods, and it was pitch black, and I wasn't exactly sure where to go and how to get back. I thought that I knew the right direction, but I didn't know for sure 100%. I was holding the cat with both arms, so I couldn't take out my phone from my pocket. So I stood there and looked around, thinking to myself where I should go. In that moment, as I stood there alone in the woods with this stupid cat, I heard a noise. It was from back behind me, but a good ways away, maybe 50 feet. But there was no mistaking it. It was the sound of a human walking. I can tell whenever it's like a deer or a random small animal, but the footsteps here and the cadence of them was clearly human. This really creeped me out.
I thought maybe I had wandered into a neighbor's yard, but I didn't really think so. I had remembered my friend saying that he owned like 10 acres going back in the woods or something like that. But I stopped and turned to the direction of the sound. I couldn't see much, just a bunch of trees and bushes. Like I said, there was no path, so that made it even more strange as to why somebody would be out there. I saw no light or anything. The footsteps then got a little bit closer and stopped. I could sort of barely see branches and bushes moving where the person was. When they stopped, I called out. I said, "Hey." There was nothing. I said, "Is someone there?" Still nothing. I tried to explain myself. I said, "Sorry, my cat just ran into the woods here and I had to chase after him. I got him though and we're heading back now." Still there was no response, nothing. I was creeped out at this point, so I turned and started walking in what my best guess was as to back the direction that I needed to go. When I started going through the woods, it was not long before I heard the sound of the footsteps behind me again, and they were following me. It was so weird. Why would someone be there and then not respond to me? I was nothing but friendly to them. So I continued to walk, and then the footsteps seemed to sort of go faster and gain on me. I stopped again and turned around. When I did, I saw a tree branch moving, and for a split second thought that I saw someone, but it was really hard to see anything out there at all. It was really just leaves or branches moving, but it could have also been from the wind. As soon as I stopped though, I stopped hearing the footsteps too. This time I said, "Seriously, is somebody following me?" There was no response at all. I turned and kept walking again, this time feeling pretty scared. And not long after I did, I heard the footsteps once more. At that point, I just started running. The cat was still in my arms, and I'm really glad that he didn't try to get away. At one point, I yelled behind me and threatened to unleash the cat on them, but this didn't seem to have any effect. We kept going. I would have thought whoever was chasing me, though, would have been able to catch up, because although I was fast, I was much slower holding on to this stupid cat that got us into this mess in the first place. I continued running and hearing the footsteps behind me. Then, at last, I saw the backyard. It was the greatest sight I had seen all day. I ran even faster and then finally made it out of the woods. I ran to the back door to the house, got inside, and then locked it behind me. The cat was now back in the house, and we were both safe. I let out a huge sigh of relief. But then I went to the back window which looked out to the yard, and I turned on the light back there. When I did, I just barely saw what looked like a man standing on the edge of the woods. Right after the light went on, he quickly disappeared back into them. I was really freaked out. But for the rest of my time there, I didn't see the guy again, and nothing creepy happened. After my friends got back, I told them about it and asked who the person could be. They said they had no idea and nobody should be back there. The neighbors' yards did not go anywhere near the spot where I would have been. And past the yard was a private woods, but that was many acres back, and I had only made it maybe 2 acres deep. They were sort of freaked out by it too, but since then they haven't said anything about seeing strange people. They still live there, and I visited a few times. I still don't know who that person was in the woods. I had worked with my coworker for a little over 3 years. We worked pretty closely on some projects over the last 2 years and even sat near one another at work. One morning I showed up and saw about 10 detectives at my place of work. I was a bit startled as this was quite unusual for my area. I looked around and saw that my coworker was in handcuffs and looked quite disheveled. I walked up to the detectives, introduced myself, and let them know who I was in relation to him. I asked what was going on, and they filled me in of why he was currently being arrested. The reason he was getting arrested was a reason unrelated to me, but it was pretty disgusting what he did. Over the course of the next 3 hours, I watched as they dismantled his workstation, went through his belongings, took evidence pictures, and so on. I was pulled in and out of a room answering questions about his character, what I knew about him, and my feelings about him as a person. I told them that he gave me a weird feeling, that I've always told my husband that I wouldn't be surprised if the cops ever came looking for him. The detective on site told me that they served a search warrant at his home and were looking for any evidence. It sounded like they found more than they anticipated for and were looking to see if there was anything else unrelated to what they were currently investigating. I was asked for my name and my husband's name for confirmation for something they found. The last hour of the day, I was pulled in for the final time and advised by one of the lead detectives, who couldn't even look at me, that I needed to ensure that I was safe and protected in the event that they didn't book him into jail that day. I came to find out he had been journaling about me over the course of at least a year, saying in his journal that he wanted to be with me, but that the problem was that I was married. His journaling lined out a plan to set my husband up for cheating on me. The end of the plan resulted in my death caused by my coworker. The officer said that everything in between was very vile. It was to the point he was crying when he was telling me to make sure that I was safe at night in case they weren't allowed to book him for whatever legal reason. Thankfully, he was charged and is looking at a long time in prison, but I still think about it and it keeps me up at night. It just shows you never really know someone. Just because they're friendly at work or are an acquaintance, you don't know who they really are at home. This is something really crazy that happened back when I was in college. I was in graduate school and my best friend Paige and I would hang out all the time. We did not live together, but we each had roommates who we lived with. I rented a house with my roommate Rebecca, who was also a good friend and was in my program for school. The house was typical for college. It had a small front yard and was in a neighborhood right near campus with a lot of other houses. On this night, Rebecca was gone and Paige was over at my house hanging out. We would be over at each other's places almost on a nightly basis. I believe it was a Friday and we didn't have classes or anything the next day, so we stayed up kind of late and eventually Paige left to go back to her apartment. I remember that after she had left, I started getting ready to go to sleep. Shortly before I did though, I got a call from Paige's roommate Presley. I was wondering why she was calling me, especially so late, so I answered. It was Paige speaking, and I answered. It was Paige speaking, and she asked me if she had forgotten her phone at my place. Apparently, Paige could not find her cell phone anywhere, so she was using her roommates to call me. I went out into the living room where we had been hanging out most of the time. While still on the phone, I began looking. I was not seeing it anywhere, though. Paige was telling me as I was looking that she had it at my place and remembered using it there. Then she said that she didn't use it on the way back and didn't have it at her place. So it was logical to believe that it was at my place. Only then did I have the thought to actually call the phone. It was late at night and I was tired, I guess. So I hung up with Paige and then called her phone. I was hoping and expecting to hear it ringing or vibrating across the room or something. But to my surprise, I heard it pick up. When her phone picked up, at first there was silence on the other end. After a few seconds of me being too surprised to speak, I finally did. I said, "Hello?" There was nothing at first, but I soon heard breathing on the other end. I said, "This is my friend's phone and I think she lost it. Did you find it somewhere?" After a few more seconds of silence, I finally heard a man's voice say, "Yeah." Then he said, "I'll bring you the phone." I said, "Actually, it's not my phone. You could bring it to my friend." He said, "No, I'll bring it to you." I was just happy that someone had the phone and was willing to bring it back. I gave him my address and then he hung up. So at that point, I immediately called Paige back via her roommate's phone. When I did, I told her what happened. Paige was so confused because she didn't know how some random guy had her phone. And now that I was thinking about it, I didn't either. I mean, she had her phone inside of my house. I knew that for a fact. Then she simply left and drove straight home without stopping anywhere. In my mind, the only explanation was that she either dropped her phone getting in or out of her car, so it possibly had been on the ground on my street or in her parking lot. Either way, the guy was supposedly on his way to bring it back now. So Paige said that she was on her way back to my place and started heading over. About 10 minutes later, she arrived. The man had not yet. We hung out in the living room wondering when he would arrive. After like 45 minutes, I called Paige's phone again. He didn't answer though. We were worried that he was not going to return the phone anymore, and unfortunately, I didn't have her location stalked or anything like that. Sometime later, I got up and walked over to the front of the house. I started looking out of the window just out of curiosity. By now, it was very late at night. But then I saw something. There was a man walking down the sidewalk. He kind of stopped in front of our house. I ducked down, but secretly kept watching. The guy started to walk into my front yard, which was very small, but had some bushes and trees. He kind of paced around a bit. Then he started walking towards the doors. I knew this had to be the guy with Paige's phone, but he didn't go to the front door. Instead, he walked past it and then walked along the front of the house in the yard. By now, Paige was over at the other window and watching as well. The man went around towards the back of the house and we were very confused. We were also kind of creeped out. He could clearly see where the front door was, so why was he going around back? We moved to the back of the house to see where this guy would go. He ended up sort of looking in a back window and then walked around the backyard a little bit. Then he made his way to the front of the house and finally went to the front door. He then knocked on it. I went over and nervously opened the door, but when I answered, I opened it just a crack.
The guy said hi and said that he had the phone. As friendly as I could, pretending I did not just see him creep around my house, I said thank you very much. I then told him he could give me the phone, and I held out my hand. He seemed to reluctantly give me the phone. Then, as I took it, he asked if he could come inside quick. I asked why, and he said that he needed to use the bathroom. I told him sorry, but ours wasn't working, which I made up on the spot. It really did work, but I just didn't want this guy coming in after his sketchy behavior. The guy didn't leave right away though. He said, "Could I just come in for a minute anyways?" I said, "No, sorry." Then I closed the door and instantly locked it. It might have seemed rude, but I wouldn't have acted that way had he not been so weird. We watched the guy standing around for another minute or so. Then he walked around the front yard for a while before finally leaving. We were so creeped out that Paige ended up staying over at my place and slept on the couch that night. We figured that the guy saw Paige's phone after she probably dropped it on the street or something. But why he was so sketchy, I don't know. The rest of my time living in that house, I thankfully never saw him again. I used to work at a Dollar Tree several years ago. I was a cashier, but did some other stuff too. Most of the time, our store in particular was pretty quiet. Especially at night, it would be pretty dead for the last couple of hours of work. I remember at this particular time, my car had some problems, so my boyfriend would often pick me up from work and also drive me when he could. Other times, I would get rides to work from other people or even take the bus. One night, I was working a closing shift at the Dollar Tree. I believe we closed at 9 p.m., so it was kind of late, but nothing crazy. The dollar store was in this quiet strip mall, and none of the stores got that much business, it seemed. I think our store was the last one open on most nights, as the others would close at like 7 or 8, or even earlier. So by 8 p.m. on this particular evening, we had no customers in the store at all. My coworker left, and I was alone to close, which I was used to doing. I knew how to lock the doors and stuff, and it would be pretty easy for the final few hours. As I was there though, sometime after 8 o'clock, this man walked in the store. Right away he looked suspicious. When he walked in, his hood was up, his head was down, and he did a quick look over at me. It wasn't even cold or raining out. I didn't think anything of it though, and just stood by my register at the checkouts. The man inside went out of my sight, and I figured that he was just shopping. But a few minutes later, I was just randomly looking around, and I saw the guy seemingly watching me from in an aisle. Like he was just standing there doing nothing but staring at me. I didn't pay it any attention and minded my business. When I looked again, he was gone from that spot. But a few minutes later, I noticed him looking at me again from another spot. Soon after though, I stopped seeing him, but he didn't leave. I was a little nervous about the guy and didn't know what was going on. Overall though, I was just happy that I would be getting off work soon. I had a little less than an hour left. However, I didn't end up seeing the guy for the rest of my shift. Soon it was almost 9 o'clock and he was nowhere in my sight. He had been in the store for almost an hour and I hadn't seen him in like 30 minutes. I made an announcement on the store speakers that we were closing soon. However, when I did, there was no response from the guy. He didn't leave and he didn't come up to the front to check out. He was nowhere to be seen at all. I was starting to wonder if he had somehow left without me knowing. But that seemed impossible because the doors were pretty much right in front of my face, just off to the left. Plus, I would have heard the doors. I got up and decided to walk out in the aisles a bit. There was a good number of places that were out of my view in the store. When I did, I still couldn't find the guy. However, I did think that I heard footsteps, and the store was dead quiet. But it was hard to tell for sure, as if it was in fact footsteps, he was moving pretty quietly. Nevertheless, I was still like 90% sure that he was inside the store, and now this was really creeping me out. I went back up to the checkouts at the front of the store. There I saw out the large window my boyfriend arriving in his car. When he would pick me up, he never came inside, but just sat in his car and would wait for me to leave. This time I texted him and asked him to come inside the store. So he got out of his car and entered. He walked over to me at the registers and didn't know about the creepy guy. We just started talking about our days as there was less than 5 minutes left until we were closed. I felt a lot safer now that I was no longer by myself. Then, about 2 minutes later, I saw movement to my left. I looked over and saw the guy leaving the store. The suspicious man quickly walked out the doors and then disappeared into the parking lot and into the night. Then I quickly went over and locked the doors. I told my boyfriend about the guy. It was a huge relief that the man was gone. After that, I finished up my tasks and we left. I was nervous to work closing shifts after that and told my boss about it. Thankfully, though, nothing like that happened again. I'm not sure if the man had something bad planned or if it was just some kind of crazy coincidence, but it almost seemed like he was hiding in the store. When he left, he didn't even buy anything, and he had been there for almost an hour. It still seems really sketchy in my opinion.
I was a lone recreation ranger in a small district in southern Idaho. The nearest town from the guard station where I lived was about an hour and a half away by car. After moving into the guard station, I had already had my fair share of problems, and I was only a couple of months into living there. The solar power was not working, and I hadn't slept well for a while due to various factors, which included bats in the cabin and some sort of animal walking on the deck at night. The woods there always had an eerie feeling to them, and I was new to the area, so it was uncomfortable for me. After 2 months into the seasonal job, I started to hear something walking and scratching on the deck at night, and perhaps even on the door. Now, this district was known for its badgers and beavers, so I didn't think much about it. When leaving the cabin at night, I always had an eerie feeling like I was being watched. One night, I was returning from my grocery run and had a bad feeling. At the time, I did not have my shotgun in the vehicle. After stepping out of the vehicle, I looked to the right of the cabin about 50 feet from my front door. All I could see was 2 eyes and 4 feet off the ground. To say I was freaked out was an understatement. I started yelling loudly to try to scare the eyes off, but the eyes only crouched down and inched closer. At this point, I could tell it was a large animal of some kind, definitely not a coyote. I tossed a piece of firewood in the general area, and the creature leaped back a bit but did not make a sound. I tossed 4 or 5 more pieces, and the creature still inched forward. At this point, I fumbled with the keys to unlock the door, and I managed to get inside and grabbed my shotgun. Technically, you're not supposed to have guns in government housing, but living out in the woods in the middle of nowhere means I didn't follow that rule. I went back outside with my shotgun now, and the creature was a bit closer. I still could not get a good look at it with my old crappy headlamp. I loaded the shotgun and continued to throw pieces of wood with one hand. Finally, the creature walked back into the brush. That night, I slept with my shotgun just in case. In the morning, a trail crew came up, and we found mountain lion tracks all over the porch, rocking bench, and compound leading back to the creek. After that event, I always heard the rocking chair move and someone or something walking on the porch, but never found any tracks after that point. Considering that it was always muddy in that area, it was weird not to find any tracks. I've been stalked by mountain lions before, and never had that eerie feeling like I did in those woods.
This is something that happened when I was in high school. I think I was about 15 years old, and I remember that I was home by myself one night. My parents went out somewhere, I really don't remember, and my brother must have been gone someplace too. I'm not sure where everybody was, but I just know that I was by myself. We had a dog back then whose name was Thomas, and he was home with me. I was doing my homework up in my room after my parents left, I remember. I was up there for a while and then came down at probably 8 o'clock or so to get something to eat. When I did, I was in the kitchen and Thomas needed to go out, so I let him out in the backyard. Our house was 2 stories and about average size, and it had a backyard of about a half an acre that was fenced in. There were a few trees around there, but overall it was a good amount of space for Thomas to run around. He would usually go outside and do his business, and then run around for a while and then go by the door when he wanted to be let back in. So I remember that after a while, I let him back in and then I went back upstairs. I returned to my homework, which would always take me a long time to do. I was pretty good at school and always had good grades, but homework would always take me forever. So maybe 30 minutes later, as I was still up there, I heard the back door to the house open. My first thought was that my parents or brother had returned home. They would never enter through the back door, but I thought that maybe they had already arrived back and I just hadn't heard them enter through the front door. I had been pretty preoccupied with my stuff, so maybe I hadn't realized. I decided to go downstairs at this point, so I got up from my desk, left my bedroom, and then headed down the staircase. The stairs at our house went down towards the back of the house between the dining room and back living room area. I made it literally 2 steps down the stairs when I saw someone down in the dining room. It was a man, but nobody that I knew. I instantly turned around and went back upstairs. I quickly ran back to my bedroom, went inside, and locked the door.
I had just recently got a cell phone, however, I had left it downstairs. Thomas had not barked at all, which was kind of strange, but overall he was a pretty quiet dog and wouldn't always bark at strangers. I didn't know what I could do, so I tried to stay hidden in my bedroom. At first, I heard nothing from the intruder. I couldn't hardly hear anything from downstairs unless it was really loud though, like a door opening or closing. However, about 5 minutes later or so, I heard the man coming up the stairs. That's when things got intense. I was really nervous, and I literally hid underneath my bed. As the footsteps went down the hallway, they approached my room. They did not immediately go to it, but I heard another door being opened. Things were quiet for a while, and then I heard the footsteps again. I was kicking myself for forgetting my cell phone downstairs, or else I could have called the cops. The footsteps then made their way to right outside my door before the intruder turned the handle. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. He seemed to stay at the door for a few more seconds, which felt like a really long time. Then he walked further down the hallway. I heard another door open, and I thought about making a run for it, but ultimately chickened out. The man went in another room for a little while. Then I finally heard him walking away down the hallway. Soon after, he went back down the stairs. I felt a little better, but I was still too scared to come out from under my bed, and I was way too scared to leave my bedroom. I had no idea if he had left the house or was still in it because I couldn't hear much downstairs, and hiding under my bed, I heard even less. More time went by and things remained quiet. Finally, I got up. I still couldn't leave my bedroom though. My parents got home a little while later, and I finally left my bedroom at that point and ran downstairs. I told them about it and the police were called, but the man was gone. He must have quietly left at some point. The cops searched up and down, and other than the back door still being unlocked, there was no sign of him even being there. Nothing was stolen or out of place. It was really weird. I'm not sure if the man ever saw me or knew that I was there, because when I saw him, he wasn't looking at me, and I'm not sure why he entered our house, but I'm just glad that he left and that my door had a lock on it. This is something that happened when I was 14 years old. Being an only child, I was fairly used to being home alone by myself from time to time. It usually wouldn't happen for very long periods of time though, but every day when I would get home from school for a few hours, I would typically be at home by myself. One Friday in the fall, I went to school and arrived back as normal. My parents were still gone at work, and they would be gone for a lot longer that night. I can't remember if it was my mom or my dad, but one of my parents had a work dinner event thing to go to, so both my parents were going straight there after work, and they would be gone until that night at about 9 or 10 o'clock. And they told me this beforehand and left me money to order a pizza to have it delivered if I wanted, so I was kind of excited for that. I was also excited to be able to just watch TV and play video games all night, or at least until my parents got back. After arriving home from school, I went directly up to my room and started gaming. Eventually, I went downstairs and hung out there for a while. Then when I got hungry, I ordered pizza. I would guess at around 7 o'clock that night, the pizza guy arrived. I answered the door, got the pizza, paid him, and then went up to my room. I started eating pizza and playing video games, which was a dream night for me back then. However, about an hour into this, and I heard the main front door to our house open downstairs. It surprised me right away, because other than my video games and the TV on a low volume downstairs, the house was completely quiet. At first, I thought that it had to be my parents, obviously. But two things were off. Number one, my parents were not supposed to be back this early, and if they were, they probably would have texted me. Number two, I didn't hear them unlock the door. It had simply just opened. As I was thinking these thoughts, I listened and heard somebody now walking into the house, although I could not hear very well being upstairs and in my bedroom. I thought back to when I had picked up the pizza from the delivery driver. That's when I realized that I thought I forgot to lock the front door. I think I just got the pizza and then went back inside and closed the door but didn't lock it. I felt terribly nervous now because I couldn't honestly remember locking it. Meanwhile, I heard footsteps downstairs going closer towards the staircase. I thought about yelling, asking if it was one of my parents, but decided not to. I also thought about trying to yell something threatening or fight whoever was in the house if it was not my parents. But I had no fighting skills. I was a skinny 14-year-old kid and didn't have anything really to use as a weapon either. Now the footsteps had reached the stairs and they were starting to walk up. I got even more nervous. As whoever was in the house was walking up the stairs, I sat there in my gaming chair basically frozen with fear. My bedroom was the second door on the left once you got up the staircase to the second floor,
And my door was not closed all the way, it was open about a foot. After the person reached the top of the stairs, I finally had the thought to close my door, but I felt like it was too late, so I didn't. My door had no lock, and the person would see me closing it, giving me away if I did. So what could I do? I couldn't really think of anything. I looked to the door, and the way the door opened was opposite where the person was, so even though they were now in the upstairs hallway, I couldn't see them and they couldn't see me. They continued walking closer at a slow but steady pace. I was still sitting in my chair. I'm not sure if I was just frozen with fear and too scared to move, or if I didn't move because I knew I would make a sound. Because obviously I wanted to hide under my bed or in the closet, anywhere that would be out of sight from this person if they chose to enter my room. But moving now would make too much sound. However, the one thing that I did have going for me was that the lights in my bedroom were off. I liked gaming in the dark. I should also mention that I had paused my game shortly after hearing the door open and the person enter the house, so that wasn't making any sound. The only noise I heard was the footsteps and the very low volume of the TV downstairs in the living room. The person walked right in front of my doorway. Then, for a moment, I saw somebody come into my view in the open crack of the door. I looked away out of fear. I was sure that the person would open the door the rest of the way, and who knows what would happen. But it didn't. I heard the footsteps moving away. I looked back over and now saw nobody there. The footsteps were now going back down the stairs. Whoever it was leaving, and they were also walking a little bit faster. Eventually, they reached the bottom of the stairs and then went towards the front door. Then they left. When I heard the door close, I ran downstairs and locked it. I looked out the windows but didn't see anyone. They must have gone out of sight. I didn't see any strange cars or anything. It was really weird. I then called my parents, who came home. Whoever had entered the house, though, was long gone. Nothing was stolen or out of place, and I never got a good look at them. I think that it was a man based on the little I saw, but that's just a guess. Overall, I have no idea why this person entered our house. Did they know that the door was unlocked? And what did they want inside? After that, I did not want to stay home alone for a while, but I did. I would have to stay at home after school while my parents were at work, but I didn't stay home alone at night for a while after that. This happened almost a year ago now. It's something that's still given me PTSD, and I'm currently on anxiety medication for it. I grew up in a small town. I was determined to get out of there from a young age. At age 15, I started working at one of the 2 local pizza places. By age 16, I was able to afford a car, a beat-up one, but it allowed me to get on the road and make deliveries, which meant more money. I had previously been robbed during a pizza delivery at a Super Bowl party once. I was held at knife point and had to forfeit all my pizza as well as my cash. This, oddly enough, didn't bug me all that much. I don't know why. To this day, I barely even talk about it, but after that incident, I took to carrying a can of pepper spray. It was late at night, almost closing time one shift, which was 1 a.m. We had gotten a call to deliver 3 pizzas to the next town over, which is a place that is out of our delivery range, but sometimes there were circumstances that would allow us to. The circumstances were that out of all delivery drivers, as well as the assistant manager at the time, there were a few that were peddling drugs. A customer would have to ask for a very specific order, specific sizes, specific toppings, and a certain order. No exceptions. It was a service policy for one of those specific drivers to make this delivery, even if it was outside our range. I was never one of them, but on this night, I was. I knew the trick of the trade, so when I saw the garlic bread bag on top of the more specific pizza orders, I knew it was a drug order. My assistant manager at the time even specifically instructed me to get the envelope from the customer and that he was sure they would tip well. I didn't want to conduct this. My hands were sort of tied though, as the usual drug delivery drivers were already out. I just wanted to finish my shift, so I took off with haste. It took me about 30 minutes to get to the location. It was in a very sparsely populated neighborhood. I went to the door and was greeted by a girl. I went to school with her a while ago, so that put me at ease a little bit. But she had changed a lot. She was pretty at one point and super outgoing. Now she looked like she had developed a drug problem, which isn't incredibly uncommon in my town. She greeted me with a smile and accepted the pizzas. Then, out of the darkness, my arms were restrained behind my back, and mere seconds later I found the barrel of a revolver placed against my head. I instantly pleaded for my life, which seemed to only amuse them. Then the one with the gun demanded my wallet. I saw no point in arguing and told him where he could find it. When I didn't have enough money in it, he demanded my work money. For a little more context, pizza places will typically tell you that their drivers don't carry more than $20 in change. This is a lie. This is mostly said so it doesn't seem like we're carrying more money in case of a robbery situation. But my robbers seem to know this. The guy with the gun hit me in the face when I didn't produce the rest of the money. I usually left this in my car, and he didn't accept my explanation. At that point, I was forced into the house. I screamed for help, but it was accomplishing absolutely nothing. The guy that was holding me threw me on the couch, and the girl had closed the door. I explained to them that I wasn't aware of any policy, and if they had an issue to please take it up with my assistant manager. The guy with the gun, who was clearly under the influence, asked for one driver specifically. He asked why he didn't show up. I told him he was making other deliveries. It took everything in me not to cry at this time. After asking me some other questions that I couldn't answer, he put the gun to my head and pulled the hammer back. He then instructed me to call the other driver and have him present himself. I slowly complied, but instead of grabbing my phone, I grabbed my pepper spray. It felt stupid, but I saw a brief opportunity to get out of there. I elbowed the pistol out of my face and then sprayed the canister onto his. I didn't take any chances. I sprayed him in the eyes, nose, and inside of his mouth. The smell of that stuff still irritates my sinuses when I think about it. Now, I have been in exactly 3 fights in my life before this, and I lost all 3 times. But after spraying him, I hit him in the crotch and then slammed my fist down on his face. We wrestled for the pistol for a few seconds. I managed to get it on the floor and grabbed it away. The other guy took a few steps towards me, but then backed up once he saw I had the gun. Once he saw that I had the gun in my hand, he backed off and asked me to leave. I'm not a violent person in the slightest, but I'll admit I still get joy out of the look on his face when he saw me holding the gun. I was on cloud 9 for a few minutes as I drove away, but once I got a healthy distance from the house, I pulled my car over and had to take a moment to compose myself. I then realized I was still holding the pistol. Upon further observation, I noticed that it only had 1 bullet in it, and it wasn't the chambered one. He could have pulled the trigger about 4 times before I got killed. He probably was going to use that as a tactic to scare me if I didn't do what he wanted. When I got back to the restaurant, my manager and I got into a heated argument over what happened at the delivery. I wasn't having that after what I went through, so I just left the store early. I couldn't really call the cops at all because I had been part of the drug deal and had agreed to do it, so I didn't think that would be smart. When I got home, I told my stepdad about what happened though. He later went to go find my manager about it. I don't know what happened, but when I got to work on Monday, I clocked in with no issues. I worked there for about another month. Then I decided I'd rather work somewhere else where I wasn't treated poorly and putting my life in danger. When I was a kid, I used to go to my best friend's house for sleepovers all the time. I would fill my backpack up on Friday morning and ride the bus home with him to stay the weekend. I didn't have a bad life, it was great, but we didn't have a lot of money at my house and we lived in a bad area. My friend had a nice house and it was just different from mine. It felt like an escape from my own life, even though my life wasn't horrible and I wasn't trying to escape it. He lived on a country road and had neighbors not terribly far, but not super close either. He had a large property that was long and went far back. He had about 3 sheds that looked like little log buildings or cabins that were very homemade and creepy looking at night, and of course surrounded by woods in the back. When everybody went to sleep at his house, everything was off. No TV and no lights. It was pitch black and dead silent, except for his mom's box fan, so when we wandered around the house at night, it got creepy understandably. One night we were up late playing on his PS2, and once we turned it off for the night, we couldn't sleep. So we went roaming around the house to see what we could do. His kitchen was lined with windows behind the counter that faced the backwoods, the sheds, and they had a large glass screen door as well. So we went to get some pop, which we weren't supposed to have late at night, and when my friend opened the fridge, I was sure that I saw a light in the shed closest to the house. The shed was still kind of far, but right out from where the woods got a little thicker, so you could see it clearly. Once I noticed it, I shut the fridge door almost on my friend's hands, and when he got mad, I told him why, but there was no light out there anymore. I talked him into waiting at the glass door with me to show him that I knew I saw something. About 10 minutes later, a light went on, more like a flashlight with the swaying. You could see it bouncing around and reflecting off the 2 little windows in that shed. It freaked us out, and we ran to his room and talked about all the possibilities, and eventually we fell asleep. The next weekend, like usual, the same circumstances happened, and I stayed at his house again. This time we wanted to see if we could see the light in the shed again. So after his parents went to sleep, we waited a while and made our way to the windows. When we got there, we didn't see anything. We went and played some games in his room, and then went back down to the kitchen probably at around 2 a.m. When we went out, we still didn't see anything. For some reason, we kind of talked each other into going outside. I honestly can't remember what for, but I imagine it had something to do with the shed or whatever. We went out the sliding door onto his porch, which was very high off the ground. We were trying to be very quiet, even though his parents' room was on the other side of the house. We got to the porch, but I was too scared to go off it, and I wanted to go back inside. But once I was about to tell him that I wanted to go back in, we heard and saw the door to the shed open. Coming out was some skinny, old, disheveled-looking person, probably a homeless man, but to us kids, he might as well have been the devil. We didn't move at all. I guess it was out of fear, but the guy started walking towards our direction a little. I doubt he even knew we were there, but something snapped me out of it, and I just remember screaming and running to the door with my friend. When we closed the sliding door, we looked back and saw the man running after us. We didn't even lock the sliding door, we just booked it for his parents' room. We woke them up and they got up, looked around the house, and saw that the sliding glass door was open, but they reassured us that it was probably an animal that got in, and they would look tomorrow. My friend and I barricaded ourselves in his room for the rest of the night. When we finally woke up around noon, his dad was outside cleaning around the shed. He found a pocket knife and a bunch of wood that was carved into things. His dad brushed it off as already being there, probably because of all the old random junk around. It was brushed off as our imagination, probably due to the fact that we always played like that. Now grown up, years later, my friend's dad told us the story of that night, but at the time he didn't want to scare us any further. But after we went to bed that night, he checked the basement and found the man down there and had to kick him out of the house. It was a homeless old man that wanted to steal food and other belongings to sell. My friend's dad said that the old man left peacefully and didn't get aggressive or violent at all, which was good. But I'm glad that he sent us kids up to bed that night after seeing the sliding door open. Because as a kid, I would have been scared out of my mind seeing that man in my friend's house. This happened about 10 years ago when I was still in high school. I lived at home with my parents and my brother. I was about 16 years old, and my bedroom was on the back side of the house on the second floor. So one night during the summertime, everyone else had already gone to bed. I didn't have to be up early or anything because it was the summertime. My brother would often stay up late playing video games in his room, and I would not stay up late quite as much, but occasionally I would watch shows or something until pretty late at night. That's what I was doing on this night. My parents both had jobs, so they were probably asleep by 11. I remember that I was hearing my brother playing video games on the other side of the wall in his room until about 1 a.m. Then the noises stopped, so I assumed that he went to bed. I was sort of sleepy, but really into the show that I was watching, so I continued. I was sitting in my bed, which was very comfortable, and watching the TV that was mounted on my wall. My lights were all off except for a small lamp on my nightstand. So I continued watching my show and was pretty relaxed. About an hour later, at roughly 2 o'clock in the morning, another one of the episodes had ended, so I finally decided to go to sleep. I got up from my bed to use the bathroom. However, when I got up, I noticed something out the window. The window was at the back side of my room and had been behind me. It looked out to the backyard, which was maybe a half acre or so. There were some trees and bushes, as well as plants scattered around. But there was also a good amount of open space. There was a man standing at the back end of the yard. I couldn't believe it at first. I kept looking at him. That's when I noticed that it looked like he was wearing a Target employee uniform. It even appeared that he had a name tag on, but it was too far away and too dark to even remotely see what the name said. The man looked young, like maybe a teenager or like 20 years old at the oldest. He wore the full Target uniform of a red shirt and tan khaki pants, like I said, and had short blonde hair. I had never seen him before and wondered what on earth was going on. The guy was just kind of standing there looking towards our house. I didn't know if he was going to break in or something. I thought about waking up my parents or brother, but I first decided to go downstairs and turn on a light to see if that would scare him off. All the lights in the house were off except for my small light in my room. I went downstairs and then towards the dining room area, which had some windows out to the back. When I got there, the guy was still standing there in the yard. I went over and turned on the back patio light to the backyard, and when I did, I saw the guy look at it and then look to the windows. I ducked down so he wouldn't see me. When I looked back up a few seconds later, I saw that the guy was now walking away. He went over to the side of the backyard and then went out of sight, appearing to leave. After looking out back for a while, I finally went upstairs. Then I went back to my bedroom and looked outside the windows there for another 10 minutes or so. I didn't see the guy at all, and I figured that he was now gone. I didn't know what that was all about. At 2 o'clock in the morning, some random Target worker goes into our backyard and just looks around at our house. Was he planning on breaking in? Did he live nearby? I didn't know, but it was sure sketchy. We had never had anything like that happen before to my knowledge. The neighborhood was pretty quiet and known for being a safe place. So after that, I was able to go to sleep. By the next day, I pretty much forgot about it. I brought it up to my parents and brother, and we talked about it for a little bit, but nothing else really could be done. There was no evidence of the guy in the yard, and he didn't try to break in or anything. I wondered though if he actually worked at Target or if he was just wearing that uniform for some reason. There was one Target that was pretty close by to where we lived. I would go there a decent amount, not like every day, but it was one of the main shopping places that I went to. I had never noticed that particular guy though. So it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. I went back to the local Target. I was just getting a couple of things and was not there for very long. It was a weekend, I believe a Saturday, so I recall that the store was very busy. When I was checking out, I noticed a long ways away what looked like the same guy. He was working at the Target doing I'm not sure what because he wasn't working at a cash register, but he was walking in front of the check lanes far away from me. When I noticed him, I kept looking at him because I was sure that it was the same guy. After I was staring at him for maybe 5 seconds, he looked over and noticed me. When he did, I remember that he kind of stopped and then turned around. He started walking in the opposite direction, and as soon as I was done checking out, I turned and walked the other way and left the store. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I have reported him? After leaving, I was about 99% sure that it was the same guy. I told my parents when I got home, but they weren't sure what to do about it either. After that, the guy never showed up in our backyard again. And another strange thing is that I never noticed him working at the Target again either, and I went there all the time. It was very strange. It was a nice autumn night, a little chilly but clear. My family and I decided to have a campfire out by the edge of our property. We lived on several acres, and the campfire pit was set up right next to the woods near our old playground. It was far from the house, but we'd used it many times before and never had any problems. We waited until it was dark, then brought out folding chairs, blankets, and snacks. My dad started the fire while my mom helped my little brother with marshmallows. My sister and I sat near the fire talking and making s'mores. After a while, maybe an hour or two in, we heard a sound coming from the woods. It was leaves crunching and a stick snapping. We paused, but figured it was a raccoon or a deer. We get animals out there all the time, so we didn't think much of it. A little later, we heard it again, this time closer. It didn't sound like it was an animal this time. It sounded like footsteps, like somebody walking through the brush. We all went quiet and listened. Then we heard somebody cough, confirming that it was definitely a person. My dad stood up and looked towards the woods. He pulled out his flashlight and shined it towards the trees. A few seconds passed, then we saw him. There was a man standing between the trees, just far enough that we couldn't see his face. Then the light hit him and he ducked behind a tree. We froze and no one said anything. He didn't move or come out again, but we knew that he was there, watching. Without a word, my dad turned and told us to go. We left everything by the fire pit, blankets, food, chairs, everything. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. Once we were inside the house, my dad locked every door and checked every window. We all stayed in the living room waiting to see if the man followed us. He never came out of the woods, at least not that we saw. Later that night, while we were still trying to calm down, my sister and I recalled an experience that we told our parents. A few weeks earlier, we had gone hiking on a trail not far from our place. There was a guy there too, alone, walking behind us at a weird pace. He didn't have a dog or hiking gear, just jeans and a jacket. Every time we stopped, he stopped. Eventually, we hurried back to the car and he vanished off the trail. We didn't think much of it at the time, just a strange guy in the woods. But after what happened that night at the campfire, we wondered if it was the same person. We never found out because we never saw his face. He never came back after that night either, or at least we don't think he did. But after that night, we stopped doing campfires after dark. From then on, we only did them in the daytime, and my dad moved the fire pit closer to the house too, just in case.
This happened back when I was in college. For my senior year, I lived in this college house with my roommate Amanda. When we lived there, we did not have a driveway, so we used to just park on the side of the street. I did this every day and would drive to and from classes and stuff. So one morning, I left the house to head to class. When I got to my car, I saw that there was a note on it like I got a ticket. And I thought that it was a ticket at first, but I didn't know why I would get one. I was parked on the correct side of the street, and nothing was weird about the way I had parked either. My car's license and tabs were up to date and everything, so I didn't know what it could be. I took the note, got into my car, and then read it. It was not a ticket. I unfolded the piece of paper, and it said, "Watch your back." It was written in pen, and that was all it said. I had no idea why somebody would write this. I immediately assumed that it had to be a prank, but I didn't know who would do it or why. It just made no sense why anybody would leave this note on my car. Could it be a mistake? I drove to class, and I ended up being gone literally all day. I had several classes, and then I stayed on campus and studied, and then I had my work on campus job after that. When I was done with work, it was nighttime, and I drove home after the long day. It was only like a 5-minute drive, so not bad at all. By that hour, obviously the roads were quiet, and our street always was anyways. But I really paid no attention to the drive. I don't remember much about it. I can tell you, though, that when I pulled onto our street, I remember a car pulling onto it right behind me. I certainly noticed that because of the headlights right behind me and nobody else being on the street. So I drove down towards our house, and then I slowed down and started to pull over where I always do. To my surprise, the car behind me did the same. It looked to be an average-looking sedan, and I obviously could not tell who was driving it with it being nighttime and dark out. I pulled over and stopped in about my usual spot, but when I did, the car stopped a ways back behind me. This either had to be my roommate or our neighbor, except it didn't look like my roommate's car, and I was pretty sure that she was already home. And I didn't remember the neighbor ever parking on the side of the road like that, or having that kind of car. So I stopped, sat in my car, and waited to see who would get out. By this point, I was remembering the note telling me to watch my back. I had forgotten about it for most of the day up until that point. As I sat there and watched the car behind me, nobody was getting out of it. I was getting really nervous. Who could it be? I waited in the car for a few more minutes, and nobody ever got out of the car behind me. In fact, it was still running. So I decided to drive away and leave. I thought that the car might follow me when I did, but surprisingly to me, it did not. I drove back towards campus and then turned around and decided to go back to my house when I realized I wasn't being followed. If the car was still there, I would drive around some more. So I was gone for maybe 10 minutes, and when I pulled back onto my street, the car was gone. I felt better, but was still really suspicious and careful. I pulled over and then looked around. The coast was clear. I got out of my car and then ran for the front door. I made it, but then saw that there was now a note stuck to the front door of our house. I took it and went inside. Once there, I read the note. It said, "Why do you leave? Are you scared of me?" I was really creeped out to see that. This confirmed that the person that left the note on my car was the same person who had followed me home. I hoped that they were still not around. I covered all the windows and made sure that the doors were locked, and I told my roommate about it. We were pretty paranoid that night, but didn't see or hear anything strange. We looked out the window every so often, but the car did not return. So the next day, things seemed fine. There was no note on my car that morning or anything like that. I went to classes and stuff and had a pretty normal day. I got back earlier that time and was not followed home. I hoped that the whole situation was a one-time thing, or maybe some kind of weird prank. I was in my bedroom studying that night when my roommate called me. She was downstairs in the living room, which was at the front of the house. I went down there and she was looking out the front window. It was mostly covered, but she was carefully looking at it and said that there was a car out there on the side of the road. I looked and the car was parked in the spot behind mine and the engine was running. My roommate told me that the car had been there for a long time, and she asked me if that was the car that had followed me home the previous night. It was. I told her yes, and we moved away from the window. Then we decided to call the cops. I didn't think the person was doing anything illegal, but with the notes he left, it could be considered a threat. Maybe even considered stalking. The only thing I knew was that whoever they were really creeping us out, and we didn't know what they were capable of. We reported what was going on, how I thought the car had followed me home the previous night, and the creepy notes that were left as well. We were told that an officer would be out there shortly, and a few minutes later, the car was still there. The cop arrived and the car began to drive away before it was pulled over, still on our street. We saw the officer get out and talk to the driver, but we still couldn't see who the driver was. They talked for a while, and then eventually the car drove away. The cop then came over and spoke with us. He said that a guy was driving, and the guy claimed that he was just hanging out and waiting to pick up his friend. He was told to leave and not come back, and was questioned about leaving notes, but the guy denied it. The man said that he would leave and would not come back. We were worried that he would return though, and the cop said that if he did, to call again. After that though, the guy never returned, and I never did get any more notes or anything either. I think the interaction with police probably scared him off and stopped him from doing whatever he was doing, but I never found out exactly who the guy was. Had he been stalking me or something? I'm not sure what he was planning to do.
This is something that happened at the last apartment building that I lived in. Overall, it was a pretty nice place. The building was fairly new, and it wasn't super cheap or anything. I liked living there for the most part. It wasn't perfect, but it was still pretty good. The apartment complex consisted of 3 buildings. 2 were right across from each other, and then the third was next to the first building. Running between all the buildings was a parking lot, and then there were sidewalks going all around the property. Surrounding the property were a few residential roads on one end, and then some commercial businesses on the other. Each building had 4 floors to it, so overall the apartment complex was pretty average. So one evening I was at home by myself and had recently gotten home from work. I think it was probably like 7 p.m. or so, and it was dark out by now. I got a call on my cell phone from a number that was in the same city as me, but the person was not in my contacts list. When I answered it, it was a woman's voice, and she said that there was a package for me in the mailroom. She said that she was one of the managers of the apartment complex, and she was letting me know that the package had been there for a couple of days, and maybe I didn't know about it and I should come and pick it up now. I was not aware that there was a package for me there, so I said thanks for letting me know. In fact, I hadn't ordered anything in a while, so I wasn't really sure what it could be. She asked me if I was home right now, and I said yes, and then she said that I should come down right now and get it, so I said that I would. Then we hung up, and I got my shoes on and left the apartment. My place was on the 3rd floor, so I walked down to the elevator and then got in it and took it down to the 1st floor. The mailroom in my building was inside the lobby but outside of the locking doors. Inside the first set of doors when you entered the building, but to the left of the second set of doors, was a small room for package deliveries. It was accessible to delivery drivers and DoorDash people that way, but it also meant that people could potentially steal the packages. However, I had never had a problem with that. So I walked off the elevator through the empty and quiet lobby and then went out the first set of doors. Then I turned and entered the small mailroom, and there was nobody else in the mailroom. There were a number of packages lying around though. Many people would take forever to pick up their packages and probably didn't even know that they were there. So there was always like 10 or 20 boxes just sitting around on the ground or on the shelves. I looked around and picked up every single package and looked at the name, but there wasn't any that were for me. I was confused. In the time that I was there looking, I remember hearing the doors from the outside open, and I glanced over to see 2 large men enter the building. But they did not go in the second set of doors. Instead, they just stopped and stood around by the second set of doors, indicating that they did not live there. My thought was that they were waiting for somebody to come down and let them in. I just continued to look for my package. I literally picked up every single box in the mailroom twice and read every single name. But there was nothing for me. I was so confused now. I even opened up my small mailbox that was also in the room, but that too was empty. Why had this woman called me and told me to get my package now? I know that she had told me it was in the mailroom. Had she also called the other 20 or so people who had packages in the mailroom as well? And now it wasn't even there. Also, it was past business hours in the apartment offices, which closed at 5 p.m., so it was strange that she was calling me after hours for this as well. I had the idea that maybe she took the package to the office, although it seemed like a long shot. Or maybe she had mixed me up with somebody else and called the wrong number. I didn't even know who this woman was. I had only briefly met one staff member of the apartment complex when I picked up my keys moving in long before this. So anyways, I decided to go back in the building. But now I had another dilemma. These 2 large men were still just standing by the doors, and had been there for like 2 or 3 minutes now, as I had been aimlessly searching around for my non-existent package. I didn't want to be the one to let them in, but as I walked over, figured I had no choice. We were not supposed to let people in the building unless we knew them, obviously, so I would prefer that whoever they were waiting for would let them in. As I made it to the lobby, I had the thought to just leave the building and then walk around and enter through a side door, but I told myself, no, don't be weird like that, just go in. So I walked over and unlocked the door with my key fob, but I was not going to hold the door open for these guys or anything. Hopefully they would be nice and not go in, but wait for their friend or whoever. As I walked past them, they said nothing. When I opened the now unlocked door, I heard them instantly start to quickly walk towards me. Before the door was even starting to close, one of the men grabbed it in a borderline aggressive fashion. They basically barged in right behind me and didn't say anything still. It kind of ticked me off, but I just ignored it and started walking into the lobby. The two men followed. I turned to the right and decided not to use the elevator. If these men were going upstairs, that would be really awkward. So I turned to the right to take the hallway down to the stairwell. But when I turned right, the men did as well, going right past the obvious elevator. So now, either A, they were going to a room over here, B, they just wanted to take the stairs for whatever reason, or C, they were following me. I hoped that it was not C. I walked down the hallway until I reached the doors to the stairwell. When I entered them, soon after, the men did as well. They were walking maybe 10 feet behind me. By this point, I was really nervous, so I decided to just leave the building. Before turning to go up the stairs, there's an exit door which is a side door to the building. As I walked, instead of going past it, I just opened the door and left. When I did, unbelievably, both men left the building as well. Now I knew that they were both following me, and I had no clue who these guys were. Basically, just out of instincts and a reaction, I just took off running. I sprinted down the sidewalk heading towards the now back side of the building. I made it to the corner and now heard both of the two men starting to sprint after me. I'm pretty fast, so I had that going for me. I just hoped that I was faster than these two men. After getting around the corner, I sprinted along the quiet back sidewalk of the apartment complex. I ran the entire stretch of it and felt like I had put a little distance between myself and the men. But I didn't slow down. I turned to the left and now sprinted back along the side of my building. There was another side door there. When I reached that side door, I very quickly slowed down. At that moment, the two men chasing me were now just reaching the corner. I knew that I had one shot to unlock the door, and I quickly took out my key fob and put it up to the door. Thankfully, it unlocked. I very quickly opened the door as I heard the men running towards me and quickly getting closer. I went inside and then made sure to slam the door shut behind me and it would automatically lock. When I did, I still heard the men approaching. Then I turned and started running for the staircase in that stairwell, which was the same thing as the other side of the building, just opposite. As I went to the stairs, the men reached the door and I heard them trying to open it, but they couldn't get in. Then they started banging on the door as I ran up the stairs. I didn't stop running until I got up to the 3rd floor, and only then did I feel much better and started to calm down. I walked back to my apartment and went inside. Then I thought about the whole situation and I realized the phone call was probably a setup. I called the cops on the guys and reported them, but when the police got there, the men were gone. They looked around but could not find them. The next day, I went to the apartment offices and met the managers. The woman who called me was not someone who worked there, so she was in fact just trying to get me downstairs. It was all a setup. I don't know who she was or who those men were, and I don't know what they wanted either, but I thankfully never saw them again. When my lease was up, I moved, and I now live in a different apartment in a different city, but I will never forget that crazy experience. This happened a couple of years ago. I used to live in an apartment that was decently nice, and I rented it with my roommate who I will call JT. Well, unfortunately, JT got a better job that required him to move away. JT and I were not good friends, but we were cool with each other. When he moved, I understood why, obviously, but I also could not afford the place on my own, so we had to get out of the lease. JT did pay the cancellation fee, but I had a short notice of like 1 month to find a new place to live, so I ended up going online and pretty much finding a random roommate. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. With my job and the city that I was living in at the time, it was either get a roommate or live in a complete dump, and I lived in a really crappy place in the past and did not want to do it again. So I was able to find a roommate. It seemed a little sketchy to find a random person online to live with, but I figured it should be fine. The roommate I found was a guy named Leonard. For the most part, he seemed normal. He didn't really seem like a guy that I would be good friends with, but that didn't matter. All I cared about was that he paid rent, was not a jerk, and did not wreck the place. The place that we found to live was a townhome, and it was older, but not too bad. The space that Leonard and I had was a living room, kitchen, bathroom and 2 bedrooms, one for each of us. After moving in, things seemed to otherwise go pretty well. I would be at work a lot and so would Leonard. Most of the time we would hang out in our rooms. But I noticed that Leonard would be gone quite a bit, and he would be gone at all hours of the day and night. I didn't really ask him about it and didn't really care that much, but it did seem a little bit odd. For example, I would sometimes hear him leaving at 11 p.m. or midnight, sometimes later, and he would be gone for a long time, but he would normally be back the following morning. Other times he would leave and I wouldn't see him for days. He never left an explanation though, which was weird because we did talk on a fairly regular basis. And when he went to visit family out of town once, he did tell me about that. Also, his job was not one where he would work crazy hours. They were pretty normal. One time was really weird though. I was at home one night and Leonard got back after me. I happened to be in the kitchen when he arrived home and we said hi to each other. Then he went into his room and shut the door. I went back to my room, but only like 20 minutes later, I remembered that I wanted to ask Leonard a question about the Wi-Fi. So I walked over to his room and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. This was strange because he had just gone into his room and I hadn't heard him leave. I knocked again. I guess he could have been sleeping or something, but for some reason I just opened the door. When I did, he was not in the room. It was completely empty. I closed the door and then wondered where he had gone. He was not in the bathroom or any other room. I just went back to my room feeling like I had gone crazy. Then, like 10 minutes after that, there was a knock on my bedroom door. I answered it to see Leonard there, and he said that he had heard me knocking on his door earlier, but he had fallen asleep. I played it off and said that was fine and I didn't mean to wake him up, and then I asked him about the Wi-Fi like I wanted to before. After that, he went back to his room. But I knew that he had not been sleeping because I had looked in his room and he wasn't there. Where had he come from? I was very confused by the whole thing. Things seemed kind of strange for the next couple of weeks. Leonard was gone all the time at odd hours and stuff. I just tried to ignore it. One time though, he was gone for like 2 days in a row. One of those days, I got curious. His door was closed, but I opened it. When I saw it in his room, it looked pretty normal. I walked inside and looked around. I think I was just curious and I guess a bit nosy. I noticed something. At the closet in the corner of his room was sort of a ladder. I walked over to it and saw that there was a trap door in the ceiling. I hadn't even noticed it, but I guess it led to the attic. I didn't have access to that in my room. By this point, I was just curious as to what was in the attic, not even trying to pry into Leonard's stuff. So I walked up the steps and opened the attic door. When I looked up there, it was completely dark. I took out my phone and used a flashlight. There wasn't much space up there, but there were a ton of duffel bags. In the corner, I saw a huge stack of cash as well. I left the attic quickly and went back down and then ran back to my room. I didn't see or hear from Leonard for several more days after that. Then there was a knock on the door one night, and it was the cops. It turns out Leonard was a drug dealer. He got caught and the cops came in and took all his stuff. I ended up moving out of that place shortly after. That was definitely a crazy situation.
One time back when I was in high school, I was left home alone for a weekend. My older sister was off at college, and my parents were both going to a friend's wedding that was out of town. They left on Friday and would be back on Sunday. In the meantime, I would be alone at the house for that time. It was not a big deal at all, because I had been home by myself many times. I was, I believe, a sophomore, so I was still too young to drive, but I figured I would just hang out around the house after school during the weekend. After my parents left, I went to school, and then I came home and was by myself. It was a relaxing night of just watching TV, eating pizza, and playing around on my phone. I stayed up later than usual because I didn't have school the next day. I was in the living room with most of the lights out and the TV on at a low volume. I was watching YouTube or something on my phone and was going to go to bed soon as I started to get tired. It was probably after 10 p.m. or so, maybe later, and there was suddenly a knock at the front door. It totally took me by surprise, because obviously I was not expecting anyone. Being home by myself and with it being late at night, this made me a little bit nervous, but I honestly didn't think it was anything that bad. I really didn't want to answer the door regardless of who it was though, so I stayed on the couch, hoping they would just go away, but they knocked again. I decided at that point to go and see who was there, so I got up and moved over to a window. When I did, I looked to see a man standing there by the front door holding a small box in his hand. He also had a hat that looked like it was from a delivery company. I felt super relieved when I realized that it was just a delivery guy. He knocked on the door again though, now for a third time. This time he said, "Delivery." I was a little bit confused, because first of all, it was late at night, but also, why could he not just drop the package and go? I guess some packages require someone to sign for it, but how could we be expected to do so at an hour when many people are sleeping? I wasn't sure what he was delivering either. I hadn't ordered anything, but my parents possibly could have. I figured they did. The man knocked again, and once more he said, "I have a delivery for you." I didn't think that he knew I was in there. It would have been impossible for him to see me, but I was figuring he wasn't allowed to make the delivery unless someone answered the door or something like that. So as much as I didn't want to answer the door so late at night, I also didn't want my parents to miss their package and have to go pick it up someplace. So I walked over to the door to answer it. When I got there, I was literally like a foot from the door and about to open it when I heard the man try opening the door from the other side. I froze. The guy was trying the handle. I could not believe that he was trying to just walk into the house. I certainly was not going to open the door for him now. He didn't stop there though. The man then basically seemed to throw himself against the door with his whole body. I heard a very loud thud. It was like he was trying to break the door down. I took a couple steps away. He did it again though. He was seemingly backing up a few steps and then ramming into the door with his shoulder or something to try to force it open. The guy really wanted to deliver the package, I guess. Either that or he was trying to break into the house, and the package delivery was just a ruse to get me to open the door. I figured that it was probably the latter. I did what really just came to my mind in that moment, which was to turn on the lights. One switch went to that front door area inside the house, and the other to outside. When I turned both these lights on at once, the man suddenly stopped. Then he started running away. I heard him leave the front door area, and then I looked out a window and saw him sprint out the yard and down the street. At that point, I called the cops. They came out and investigated, but the guy was long gone. I really didn't have a great description either. After that, they left. I was really nervous to go to sleep that night, but thankfully, the guy never returned. He was obviously a fake delivery guy. I think either he wanted me to answer the door, or he was just pretending to be a delivery guy to not look suspicious in case another neighbor saw him. Either way, it was extremely creepy. I also sometimes wonder if he knew that my parents were out of town because their car was gone, so the driveway was empty. So possibly, when I went to the door, he was startled not thinking anybody was home.
Not too long ago, I got home from work one night and went inside. I live in an apartment complex. There are a few buildings in the complex and it's fairly new. The place has parking garages, but I don't pay extra for a space. Instead, I just park in the outside parking lot that the complex has. There's a lot of spaces, but it still ends up filling up a lot. So I typically park kind of far away, but near the side door from my building. So I just get out of my car, walk along the sidewalk for a short ways, and then enter the side door and go upstairs. The sidewalk goes around the whole complex, and many people walk their dogs on it. So on this night in particular, I had stayed kind of late at work. I got back to the apartment at a little after 11 p.m. By now, it was very quiet and nobody else was outside. I left my car, walked to my building, went inside, and then went up to my apartment on the 3rd floor, only to realize that I didn't have my phone. I looked around but couldn't find it. However, I quickly realized that I probably had just forgotten my phone in my car. Many times it would fall out of my right pocket and onto the seat of my car. The seat and my phone were both a dark color, so I would often forget it. This is something that had happened several times before. So I was slightly annoyed, but really it was not a big deal. I left my apartment and walked back downstairs and out the side door to the parking lot. When I got back to my car, I opened the door to find my phone on the front seat. I breathed a sigh of relief and then picked it up. However, when I turned to walk back to the side door of the apartment building, I now saw that there was a man standing there. He was just kind of hanging out right in front of the door. I didn't know where he had come from, but I started to walk back. However, as I walked on the sidewalk, the man did not move in any direction. He was wearing a hood and sort of pacing around a little bit, but not really going that far in either direction, and his overall appearance and demeanor seemed sketchy. To avoid him, I decided to turn to the left and enter through the front door of the building instead. This was not a big deal, and I was not at the intersection of the sidewalk yet, so it was fine. When I got there, I went to the left instead of going straight and headed for the front door. The guy was still there in about the same spot. I veered left and began walking towards the front door of the apartment building, and as I did, I sort of saw out of the corner of my eye the guy start to walk in my direction. Now, he was a long ways away, but it gave me a bad feeling. So I kept walking, and when I got closer to the front door, I could hear the man walking on the sidewalk behind me. Now I had to make a decision. I could go in the front door and have this man possibly enter right behind me. What if he was a sketchy guy and I didn't want him in the building? I decided not to enter but just walk around to see what would happen. I went past the front door and soon heard the man pass by it as well. Then I walked along the front of my building. This would connect with another sidewalk going around the whole complex. As I walked down that, the man trailed me at probably 40 feet behind. At one point, I went down this sidewalk that just kind of looped back to the original one. It was a test to see if the guy was following me or not. When I did, he did the same thing. Now I was really creeped out. I went around the building and was now behind it. There was no door to go inside there for my building because it was actually a different building between and my key wouldn't unlock it. So I kept walking, now going faster. When I made it to the corner, I rounded it quickly. Then I just went for it. I took off running and sprinted a good 50 feet until I figured that the man would be rounding the corner. Then I stopped. I heard him coming around the corner, and he was now almost 100 feet back. With this distance, I decided to enter the original side door that I had wanted to go in the first place, as it was now very close by. I went to the door, quickly entered, and got inside. When I did, I looked out to see the man now full-on sprinting towards me. He got to the door as I walked up the stairs, and I heard him trying to open it. He didn't say anything, but he banged on the door a few times. I went upstairs and got back to my apartment. I had never seen the guy before, and I don't think he lived there. I did wonder, though, if he was possibly a resident who just forgot his keys or something. But if that was the case, he used the most sketchy method possible to try to get back in. Why follow someone in the shadows at 11 o'clock at night and try to sneak in? I think he was probably there for no good. Either way, I haven't seen him since.
Something really scary happened to me when I was in high school. It all started one day when I was a junior. To that point, it had seemed like a very normal school year. I was kept very busy as I was involved in sports, school activities, and had a lot of friends as well. This was in first semester, and I played on the volleyball team, so we had practices or games on most days. My best friend Rachel and I had a class together during third period. Between every class, we had our lockers next to each other, and we would hang out by them and other people in our grade. So I remember that one day Rachel and I got to our class. Most of the hour went by like normal, but sort of towards the end, there was suddenly an announcement for a lockdown. Everyone in the class got nervous and was wondering what it could be about. We followed the lockdown procedure. All the students had to move to the back of the classroom. The door was locked and the lights were turned out. We were all told to be quiet. This went on for about 30 to 45 minutes probably. Then it was over. It was announced that it was safe to return to classes like normal. Obviously, the period was over by then, so we left the class and went into passing time. When I got back to my locker, I saw that there was a small sticky note on it which had not been there before. I looked at it, and written on the inside was a handwritten note which said, "I'll be waiting for you." I was very confused when I saw this. I didn't know what it meant or who it was from. I showed it to Rachel, who was just as confused as I was. So we asked a few friends nearby, thinking maybe it was a joke, but nobody knew anything. I didn't connect it to the lockdown at all at that point, as it just wasn't on my mind to do so. I was wondering what the lockdown was for, and a lot of people were talking about it. Nobody seemed to know, though. The only thing I heard was someone say that someone else said some guy was in the school. You know how rumors can be made up or travel in a high school, so I didn't know if this was true or not. But either way, it was safe now as we were allowed to return to classes. The rest of the school day went on as normal. After school, I had volleyball practice, which didn't start right away because we had to wait to get in the gym. So I hung out at the school with my teammates. We then had practice, and it wasn't until like 6 p.m. that I was done for the day and could go home. So I left and then went to drive back. By now, the school was quiet and it was getting dark outside as well. After I left the school, I remember that a car pulled out onto the road behind me and started following me. I didn't know that it was following me at first, but then it got really close. When I turned, it turned as well. This continued, and I was annoyed as to why it was following me so close. However, I did not recognize the car or know who might possibly be driving it. I continued to drive home, which would take me almost 15 minutes. The more turns I made, the car was still there. I was getting worried and wondering what I should do. I could not tell at all who was driving. I could just barely see the figure of a person in the driver's seat. It was just too far away and too dark to see any details. When I was getting close to my neighborhood, the car was still there. It was literally just us two out on the road. Before our street, I started driving around the block. The car was still there. I started turning randomly, which the car would do as well. Every turn I made, it made. I then took out my phone and called my dad because I was freaking out. He told me to keep driving and not stop, and he was on his way. I stayed on the line with him, and he asked me where I was. He then drove out in his truck and got behind the car that was following me. At first he honked, but the car did nothing and continued following. It was then a line of us 3 cars randomly driving down these residential streets at night. My dad then drove right up behind the car. He actually hit the back of the car with his truck, not that hard, but bumping him. He honked again. The car then turned at the next street, which is not where we were going, and it sped away. We then went back home, and my dad called the cops as well. We told them about what had happened. It was then after the dust had settled and I was back home that I started to connect the lockdown to the note and to the guy following me. I wondered if someone was stalking me. I went on my Instagram account and realized that I had a bunch of message requests from a user. I hadn't realized this because they didn't show up with the normal messages. You had to click over to requests, which I never did. This user had been sending me messages for days. They started out fairly normal, but eventually he said that he was going to find me and come to my school. I showed them to my principal the following day, and the police got called in. I told them everything, and they did an investigation. I remember that they ended up finding the guy, thankfully. It was a pretty crazy situation, though. I hadn't noticed because I had just been so busy with everything, but I'm glad that nothing bad ended up happening.
This is a creepy story that my roommate and I experienced in the fall of our freshman year of college. For context, me and my best friend met in high school and roomed together in college. We were city kids, but went to college out in the country. The campus was secluded from the highway and was surrounded by woods. Our freshman year, we shared a typical cinder block dorm room. 2 single beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, and a closet with no doors, which had a cutout on the top of it for storage containers. There was enough space for somebody to climb up and sit up there if they wanted to, and we often did. One night, as usual, we stayed up late playing video games and talking for hours. We talked about school and dream jobs and all kinds of stuff. My friend suddenly changed his tone as he told me he was having these recurring dreams that were freaking him out. In the dream, he was walking in the woods and came across a porcelain doll that for whatever reason was very unnerving to him. Every time he went to pick it up, he would suddenly wake up in a panic, like you do when you dream that you're falling. I could see that it was bothering him, but I didn't think anything of it. I told him he was probably thinking too much into it, and it would probably pass in time. This was my opinion on the matter until a few days later, I started having the same dream. One night we both had the dream at the same time, and we both woke up sweating and scared. This happened on a Thursday night, and we decided that since the next day was Friday and we both had a light schedule, we would take our bikes on a ride in the woods near our campus. We needed some time outdoors in the nice fall weather to enjoy nature and the changing scenery. Class ended and we got lunch at the cafeteria. Then we hopped on our bikes and rode to the trail that led to the woods. As we were riding, we remarked the whole time how similar the dream we had been having was to the woods we were currently in. We rode for an hour, and we could feel the tension and uncomfortable vibes increasing the deeper we went on the trail in the woods. Eventually, we stopped when we saw something laying on the ground on the side of the trail. It was a porcelain baby doll with a green dress and bonnet. It was an exact match to the dream we were both having. We both felt really creeped out to the point where we were dripping in sweat, even though it was a cool and overcast autumn day. The most unnerving thing was that the doll was in pristine condition, completely unaffected by the dirt and mud around it. Quickly we looked at each other, and without a word spoken, we agreed that it was time to leave. We hopped on our bikes and took off for campus. Neither of us could sleep that night, so we put on a movie. Eventually we passed out. In the early morning hours, we both woke up and heard a girl giggling. We both thought that maybe a girl had snuck in, but that wasn't the case.
we heard a voice say, "Hey, up here," and looked up to the storage cutout above the closet. A red-headed girl in a white dress and an indistinguishable face sat there expressionless. We just stared. In a passive voice, she said, "Why did you leave me there?" Neither of us could speak. The girl screamed this time, "Why did you leave me there?" In a flash, everything on the storage cutout fell to the floor and broke open. The noise was unnaturally loud, so loud that it woke our neighbors up next door, who were also good friends. They knocked on the door from the adjoining bathroom and entered the room. We had no way of explaining to them what happened. We thought they'd think we were crazy, so we told them we thought the base of the cutout broke and dumped our stuff on the floor. They accepted the story, and we spent the remainder of the night cleaning the mess. We never went back in those woods the rest of our time at school. The dream kept occurring, but the frequency of it slowed down and eventually stopped. To this day, as close of friends as we are, we don't talk about the doll in the woods and the redhead girl in fear of having the dream again. A couple of years ago, I used to work at a family dollar store. I was young and in high school, and it was one of my first jobs. I would do a lot of stocking shelves as well as other odd jobs around the store. I was rarely a cashier though. So one night there were a few of us working. When I got there, I started out restocking a bunch of areas in the store. I got some products from the back of the store and then would replenish the supplies in the aisles. It was a very quiet night and things were not too busy at all, which made my job easier. At one point, as it was starting to get late, it was maybe 7 p.m. It was dark out by now and I was supposed to take out some trash. Our store was not in a very busy area at all. There were other stores and businesses pretty close by, but directly behind our store and next to it was a lot that was sort of open. There was woods that was behind the store and there was a small gravel area for deliveries behind it as well. Then there was the trash bins right behind the store also. So I left the store through the back door, and when I looked across the small open field to the woods, I noticed something strange. Sort of behind a tree, there was what appeared to be an older looking SUV there. This car was literally in the woods. I did not know why. I couldn't tell if anybody was inside or not, because it was dark and the windows were too tinted. Plus, I could only see the front part of the car. I thought it was really strange how it was mostly in the woods, but I finished taking out the trash and then went back inside. Then I got back to work in the store doing more restocking and things like that. Later, when it was really late and we closed soon, I was supposed to take out the trash again. By that time, the store had no customers in it at all and things were very quiet. By now, I had forgotten about the SUV in the woods. However, as soon as I opened the back door to go outside though, I saw the SUV still in the same spot. But right as I looked, I saw several men emerge from it, and they were all wearing dark clothing and what looked like ski masks over their heads. I believe there were 3 or 4 guys there. As quickly as I started to open the back door, I closed it. I maybe saw them for a total of 1 second and never opened the door all the way. I'm not sure if they saw me or not. I went back inside and the back door automatically locked, thankfully. But I ran out of the back to the front of the store as quickly as possible. In that moment, I yelled loudly for my coworkers to lock the front doors. I didn't know how to do that and it was never part of my job. One of the 2 coworkers that was there asked me why. I told her that I saw guys in ski masks outside and to just lock the doors right now. She saw how serious I was and my other coworker heard as well. One of them went over and quickly locked the doors. Not even a minute after that, the masked men arrived at the front entrance doors of the store. They tried getting in, and when we saw them, we called the cops. The guys started banging on the glass a little, and we went to the back of the store in case they broke in. But the men did not break the windows or anything. Instead, they turned around and left. The cops got there a short time later, but the men were gone. We told them everything we knew. It seemed pretty obvious to me that the men were planning to rob us. I'm not sure if they had guns or not. I didn't see any, but it was very possible. The men were likely hiding out and waiting until the store was quiet and about to close. I'm really glad that I saw them when I did, and that the doors got locked before the men could enter. I think the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me while trucking was a few years back, on a run from Tucson, Arizona up to Salt Lake City, Utah. The main highway was washed out from a flash flood and still closed, so I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in lower Utah. I'd never been that way before. The road was narrow, twisting through canyons and stretches of scrubland.
It was late, close to midnight, and I needed to take my rest for the night. I hadn't seen another vehicle in probably an hour. The nearest town was about 40 miles away, so when I finally found a wide enough shoulder, I pulled over, set the brakes, and crawled into the bunk. The truck rocked a little from the wind, but otherwise it was dead silent. I must have fallen asleep fast, because the next thing I knew it was around 4 in the morning and something woke me up. At first I couldn't tell what it was, just a faint sound like someone tapping or fiddling with something metal. But I realized it was coming from right behind my cab, where the air and power cables connect to the trailer. It was only about 6 inches from where my head was resting, but on the outside. I laid there listening, and then my truck shifted and bounced a bit. Something heavy had climbed onto the landing at the back of the truck. My first thought was maybe a bear or a large cat, something big enough to shake 40,000 pounds of steel. I reached for my flashlight, but stopped. I didn't really want to open the curtains or go outside. I figured if it was an animal, maybe I could scare it off. I slammed my hand hard against the inside wall of the cab. One solid hit. What happened next made my blood run cold. Instead of a growl or the sound of claws scrambling away, I heard a man scream. Then I heard a heavy thump, like someone had fallen off the back of the truck. Before I could even process that, I heard shouting. Not one or two voices, more than a dozen. Men yelling back and forth, running around my truck. I jumped into the driver's seat, heart racing, and flipped on the headlights. The beams lit up a whole group of soldiers in full uniform. I cracked the door and shouted, "What in the world is going on?" They explained how they were doing an army training exercise, and they were supposed to find and secure an abandoned truck. It turned out the truck was still 3 miles down the road, but they had obviously thought that it was my truck. I started laughing, partly from relief, and partly about how absurd it all was. I climbed down, talking with them for a bit, and told them that I used to serve myself. They radioed to their commanding officer and explained the situation. They promised that I wouldn't be bothered for the rest of the night by the other squads doing the same exercise. After they cleared it up, they apologized and moved on down the road. I sat there for a long time after that, as it was hard for me to fall back asleep. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of fear before, or that kind of relief afterwards. When I was younger, I had a few roommates. All of my college years except for one, I had roommates, and then the first few years out of college as well. At one point, I lived in a house with another woman who was around my age. Her name was Allison, and I actually worked with her, and that's how we met. We were coworkers and sort of became friends. However, she ended up changing jobs. Now, the two of us were never that close, and never best friends or anything. I always thought that she seemed a little odd, and I'm not just saying that. We remained in touch a little on social media and text, and she lived in the same city as me. So when I needed a new place, she happened to be looking as well, and we decided to get a place together. Allison told me that there was a place that she was interested in, and she would send me all the details. When she did, I got the information, and I thought that it was a good situation. The place was pretty expensive, and it looked okay, but I could afford it, so I agreed. It was a house, and it was small, but it had 2 floors and a basement, and the neighborhood was decent. We each had a bedroom upstairs, and the rent was $1,200 a month each. I had not lived in the area long at all, so I didn't know much about the other prices because I hadn't looked yet. So we moved in, and we each had a bedroom upstairs. Allison really organized everything, and she even met with the landlord when I was at work to get the keys and stuff. I got the Wi-Fi and she would pay me for it, but then she would pay for the rent and I would pay her for it. Living there, things went pretty well. Alice and I got along good, and we both took care of the house and were gone a lot for our jobs. I remember that after living there for like 6 months, our landlord came over for an inspection. I'm not sure why, but he had to come into the place to look around and stuff. When he came over, Allison was gone, but I was home. The landlord entered the house and said hi and asked how living there was going and stuff. I told him that it was going well, and we chit-chatted for a bit. Then he started looking around and asking if things were working well, like the sinks and heat and AC. All that kind of stuff. Everything was good. Then when he got upstairs to our rooms, he noticed how Allison's room was kind of a lot larger than mine. I had known that her room was bigger, but I had never been in Allison's room, as she would always have the door closed when she was in there, as well as when she was away, and I never thought to go in or anything. When the landlord brought up how her room was a lot larger, he asked if I paid less in rent. I said no, we both pay $1,200. He then corrected me and said, "You mean $600. I was confused until he told me that the total rent for the house was $1,200 a month. It was then that I realized that Allison was scamming me. I told him how she said it was $1,200 each, and that's what I had been paying her. He said that we needed to figure it out and she might be trying to steal from me, because the rent was a total of $1,200, not $1,200 each. It was supposed to be $600 each. So I was essentially paying the total rent and she was living there for free. Plus she had the larger bedroom. I was so mad. The landlord soon left. When Allison got back that day, I told her about it. At first she claimed that the landlord must have been confused or mistaken. But when I pressed her with more details, she just ran away to her bedroom and locked the door behind her. I was furious, but decided I would handle it the next day, as she clearly wasn't coming out of the room. The following morning when I got up, Allison was gone, and all her stuff was gone too. She had moved out in the middle of the night. After that, I lived there on my own. I contacted the landlord and reported it. He said Allison informed him that she was moving out, and she tried to say that it was because I was refusing to pay the rent. However, he knew what really happened. He ended up being nice to me and giving me a discount for the final few months I lived there by myself, and he charged a fee to Allison for breaking the lease, I think. Either way, I never saw her again. I suppose I could have sued her or something, but I never thought to do that. I blocked her on everything, and I still can't believe how she scammed me.
This is something that happened a couple of years ago now. It's something that's really crazy and I still can't believe happened. I was driving home from work very late one night. I often work late night hours, or at least I did back then. They seem to have been more normal over the last year or so. But basically I was driving home at like midnight. So anyways, I lived maybe 15 minutes from work, and I drove this older car that wasn't in the best of conditions. I had bought it used, and when I bought it, it was already not that great of a car. I had it for years at this point. The car was making some strange noises with the engine when driving and things like that. It had never broken down though, and I don't know much about cars, so I mostly just ignored it. I was really busy with work, and it's an easy thing to forget. But on this night, as I drove home, I was about halfway back when the car just kinda died. The engine made a sputtering sound, and then I basically lost power. The car then limped to the side of the road, and I parked it on the right side and put my hazards on. At this time, I couldn't call any friends or family, or at least I didn't want to because it was really late. I figured everybody would be sleeping, so I wasn't really quite sure what to do at first. I also didn't know what exactly was wrong with my car or how it could be fixed. I tried starting it again, and it sounded for a moment like it might work, but then the engine did not turn over. So I stopped and looked around. The road was very quiet with how late it was, and it was not that busy of a road anyways. I got out my phone and then started trying to figure out if there was any place that I could call for help, or if I should get out and try to walk somewhere. So I was looking on the map to see how far it would be to walk to the nearest place. I spent a few minutes doing this, and in that time, a couple of cars drove by every so often. There would maybe be one every minute or two. None of them stopped or anything though. A few minutes later, when the road was quiet, I looked up and then saw something straight ahead. Up on the road, on the other side of it to the left, was a man walking. This was strange because there were no sidewalks on this road, and it was kind of in the middle of nowhere like I said. So why would anybody be walking on this road at all, much less in the middle of the night like this? And his overall appearance was not helping the situation. He was tall and thin, but wore all dark clothing and was looking down as he walked. It seemed kind of suspicious. He was walking in my direction, but he was on the other side of the road far ahead of me. I thought that probably he would pass me by and keep going. However, when he got a little bit closer, I saw him look over at me for a moment. For whatever reason, the guy was giving me a really bad feeling. Maybe it was because of the fact that I was stranded on the side of the road late at night. I would imagine everything in this situation feels a little bit creepier. So I sat there wondering what the man would do. As soon as he almost got even with me, but was still a little bit ahead of my car on the other side of the road, he turned, and then right when he got about even with my car, the man suddenly started crossing the road. He was headed straight for me. Sure, maybe it could have been to try to offer me some assistance, or maybe just say hi. But without even really thinking, as almost just a reaction, I turned the key again to try to start the engine once more. I figured that it wouldn't work, but this time, the engine actually started up. I felt a huge amount of relief as the car was now running and I could drive away. In this moment of celebration in my mind, I didn't realize what the man was doing. The next thing I knew, I looked over and he was now in a full sprint just feet away from my car. It made me freeze for a moment, and then the next thing I knew, he arrived at my driver's door. Instead of knocking or anything, he instantly tried opening it. My door was locked, so he didn't get it open, and it didn't take me long to snap out of it, and I quickly put the car in drive and hit the gas. I sped out of there, and the guy ran with my car until he couldn't anymore. He said nothing, but clearly had wanted something from me, and I don't think it was to see if I needed any help. It was very aggressive the way he approached my car and tried opening the door. I drove home, and the very next day took my car to a shop. I haven't broken down on the side of the road late at night since then. I'm still not sure what that man's intentions were or where he even came from.
There was this kid who was briefly at our school for a few months in high school. I will call him Tommy for the story. I come from a town where the people you went to school with together in kindergarten were the same kids you graduated high school with. Tommy moved to our school about halfway through our freshman year of high school. When new kids came to our school, everybody flocked to them. The first time he and I had a class together, I remember the teacher asking him if he had his books yet. He responded with, "My wife never confirmed my school schedule with the front office." I remember everybody thought it was funny. You're 14 years old and you have a wife. He was clearly trying to be funny and get a laugh from the class and the teacher. My friends and I were skating after school one day and we saw Tommy. I remember talking with my friends about the joke he said in class, and we all became oddly infatuated with this kid. It took some time, but after about a week of letting him hang out with us, he became one of the boys. One of my buddies asked if we could go to sleep at his house on Friday night, since we would do sleepovers often with each other on the weekends. He looked shocked when we asked, but the next day at school, he did say it was okay after asking his parents. My buddies and I rode our bikes to where he lived, with clothes for the night and our skateboards strapped to our bags. We met his family, who at face value seemed completely fine. Then things got a little weird. First, his dad had a huge weapons collection. At the time, I thought it was awesome. He even took us out into a field by a canal to shoot some of his assault rifles. Next, we met Tommy's wife. Turns out he wasn't trying to be funny in class, and she was real. She was also 26, and the whole wife situation with the 14-year-old boy was definitely strange to say the least, but we didn't intrude or ask a ton of questions. They would like to hold hands. At the time, we thought this was awesome. It was like dating a senior when you're a freshman. Things kind of got to a new level of weird though when Tommy's dad had his arm around Tommy's mom, and his arm was around another girl that couldn't have been terribly older than we were at the time. Apparently, they were both his wives. We then spent about 2 hours praying with the family in the living room. I was raised Catholic, but couldn't determine which religion they were practicing. Once we finished with that, we went outside to start skateboarding. After a few minutes, his dad came outside and ordered us to get into the house. Tommy's mother then had us stand in a line outside of the bathroom to take a bath. I don't know why we agreed to the bath, but we took a bath one at a time, and I remember we were not allowed to drain the water from the tub. I was the last one to bathe, unfortunately. Also, all the mirrors in the house were covered with bed sheets. I don't know the significance of this, but to me it makes more sense not to have mirrors at that point. We were told to go to bed even though the sun wasn't even down yet. Tommy went to bed with his wife. The three of us that remained just laid there in one single queen-size bed and talked about how much fun we weren't having. The final straw for the night was when we heard Tommy's parents in the other room. It was almost 11 p.m. and we decided to just get on our bikes and leave. It was dark out and we had to ride through some bad neighborhoods, but we made it safely to a buddy's house. Tommy was pulled out of school about a week later and we never saw him again. I don't know what that family was into. Maybe it wasn't creepy at all and I just didn't understand. The only thing I know is we felt very uncomfortable. Out of curiosity, years later, I went to find Tommy on Facebook, and I can confirm that him, his mother, father, and one of his sisters had all died. There were no public records of what happened to them or if they died at the same time. I never felt in danger at his house during that sleepover, but it was a disturbing moment in my life when I think back to it. The scariest event that's ever happened to me took place a few years ago. It was winter time and I was driving back home from work. It was really late, probably around midnight. It had been snowing for a while, but after I got on the roads it started to pick up. A blizzard was happening, it seemed, as I was trying to navigate my way back home. I already lived in a little bit more rural of an area, so because of the combination of a blizzard and it being late at night, the roads were completely empty.
Most of them were surrounded by woods or woodland, so this made the driving especially tough. There were less other cars or snowplows to clear the roads. I drove an SUV with four-wheel drive thankfully, but even still it was tough driving. I was going really slow to avoid sliding off the road, and I was taking longer than I usually would. I don't think that I saw another car for pretty much the entire drive. When I had made it a little more than halfway back, I was on a random road, not really near anything. It was mostly woods on both sides. I turned a curve and noticed somebody up ahead walking along the side of the road. I slowed down even more, and as I got closer, realized that it appeared to be a younger woman who was not wearing a coat. She was half on the road and half just off it in the snow. When I approached her, I was concerned for her safety. I did not know why she was out here walking in the middle of a blizzard. She looked at me and sort of waved as I got closer. I decided to stop and see if she needed any help. Now, normally I would not be one to pick up hitchhikers or random people, but in this situation of a blizzard, I was willing to make an exception. So I came to a stop by the woman and I rolled down my passenger side window. I asked her if she was okay and what she was doing out in the snow. She came over to me and looked inside my car. Then she told me that she was trying to get home from work and her ride had never showed up to get her. She added that her phone was dead. I asked her how far of a walk it was and she said that she didn't know and was kind of lost. She seemed nice and it was a tough situation for her to be in. So I asked her if she wanted to use my phone to call someone or if she wanted a ride, and she said that she wanted a ride. So I told her to hop in and unlock the door. She was really nice. She said thank you and that she was freezing cold. So I asked her what her address was or where she wanted me to take her. She gave me a street name and I put it into my phone. She looked it over and then confirmed to me that it was correct, and then I started driving. It was not too far away, only like a 5-minute drive according to my phone, but I knew that it would likely take longer in this snow. As we started to drive, we talked a little bit and the girl was very nice. We just talked about the weather and how bad the snow was and how we didn't expect it. I was happy to be able to help her out, and I was also glad that she didn't live too far out of my way. After driving on that road, I turned at a road up ahead of that and it led to a neighborhood. I crossed a sort of busier, larger road and then got to this neighborhood area. It wasn't the nicest looking neighborhood, but it had a lot of small houses all close to each other. There were these back alleys running behind the houses and they didn't have much for yards. So I got to the one street and the woman told me to go around back to the alley and drop her off there. So I turned and got into this long back alley. I had to take this even slower because of the snow, as it was obviously not cleared yet. Plus, the alleyway was very narrow. She told me that I could stop there, and so I did. We parked behind this garage just up in front of us, and I couldn't see much because of how dark it was back there. However, the woman did not immediately get out of my car. She was just sitting there. Then she took out her phone. I didn't even realize it because in the moment I had forgot, but she had told me that her phone was dead earlier. Well, she took it out now and was working just fine. She said something like, "Sorry, 1 second." I was just like, okay. But then soon after, I saw these two men come out from behind the garage just in front of us. They started aggressively walking towards my car, and one went to my driver's side and the other to my passenger side. As they got closer, I actually heard the woman hit the unlock button on her door. The way the guys were walking towards me seemed like trouble, and as an instinct, I wanted to get out of there. So I put my car in reverse and started quickly backing up. When I did, the woman yelled at me to stop and stay. I didn't listen. I just kept going, and the guys started running after me. I went faster, thankfully did not get stuck in the snow, and made it back out to the other street. Then I drove down it a short ways before I was far enough away from the two men. The woman didn't say anything. I stopped and told her to get out, and I had gone far enough. She didn't say anything still, and just left my car and slammed the door on the way out. Then I drove home. I know that it was all a setup, maybe to steal my car or rob me or something like that. I'm just glad that I was able to get away. This happened a couple of years ago. My car needed new windshield wipers as the ones I had were getting old and broken. They were mostly just smearing the rain around and hardly even helped much. Yes, it made the visibility slightly better, but overall not by a lot. After rain one night, I decided to go the very next morning to the local auto parts store. So the next morning I drove there and parked. When I arrived, it was still pretty early, so there was not really anybody else there. I went inside and started looking for the windshield wipers. There was like a million different kinds, and they were all down this one aisle kind of deep in the store towards the back. I was looking and trying to figure it out, and I wasn't really sure what my car needed, but there was a book with all the different kinds in it, so I started looking through it. As I was there, I sort of heard footsteps, and then out of the corner of my eye, saw someone enter the aisle that I was in. But they didn't go in far, they just stopped at the very end of it. I thought at first that it was an employee of the store coming over to see if I needed any help. But once it seemed like the person wasn't moving, that seemed kind of odd. They were just standing at the end of the aisle, and it appeared as though they might be looking at me. I hadn't looked up at them because I was reading the guidebook, but it was like you could tell someone was there and facing you. After them not moving for maybe 15 seconds, it seemed really weird, so I looked up. When I did, I saw a woman standing there and looking at me, but as soon as she saw me, she quickly moved back and pretty much ran away out of the aisle. She was gone within a second or two, and I thought that it was really strange. She did not work at the auto parts store either. I just went back to looking for the windshield wipers at that point. After I found the kind that I needed, I had to actually locate them in the store. Luckily, it was in that same aisle, but I was there for probably another 5 minutes. In that time, the woman did not come back, and I didn't see or hear anyone. So then, once I got what I needed, I walked up to the front of the store to check out. I remember that as I was walking up to the counter, I saw that woman again. She was walking from out of an aisle much closer to the front of the store. As she was walking, she looked over at me and then continued. She walked right for the doors and then left and went outside. It was a little strange. I went up and checked out, buying my windshield wipers. My plan was to put them on my car as soon as I got back home. I walked out and left the store. As I approached my car in the parking lot, when I was about 10 feet away, I hit the unlock button on my keys. However, as soon as I did, seconds later I heard the back passenger side door to my car open. Somebody was there on the other side, but I wasn't able to see them. In my view was the driver's side of the car. They had been hiding behind it. Whoever was there literally got inside my back seat and then shut the door. I stopped in place where I was out of disbelief. I was now probably 5 feet away from my car. I looked but could not really see the person who had entered my car from the angle that I was at. The windows were tinted, nothing crazy, but with the sunlight and angles, I could only see that there was a person in there, but no details. After like 10 seconds, I asked who was there. I got no response. I told whoever was in my car to get out. They still did nothing. I got a little bit closer and looked. When I did, I realized that it was the same woman from the store. I was really confused by this. I told her again to get out, but she did not listen. At that point, I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know if she was dangerous or anything, but I decided to open the door. I carefully reached for my driver's door handle and opened it. When I did, the woman then quickly opened the back passenger side door which she was closest to. She then jumped out of the car and took off running in a sprint. She ran through the parking lot and then disappeared into another parking lot of a nearby business and went behind a building. I was beyond confused, but I wasn't really sure what to do, so I just left and went home. I'm still not sure what to make of it. I'm guessing that the woman was on drugs or something. I'm not sure why she chose to mess with me like that, though.
I've been hiking for a few years now, and one evening I went hiking on a trail I've done before, which I considered my favorite. It's well known for its beautiful views, and I had planned on a simple evening hike. I wasn't expecting it to take too long, so I didn't bring much, just water, a few snacks, and my phone. As the evening went on, the weather turned cooler. The sun was dipping lower in the sky, and I knew it would be getting dark soon. I had planned to stick to the main path, but I decided to take a shortcut that would get me back to the car a little faster. I'd done it before without issue. This time, though, the shortcut led me into unfamiliar terrain. The woods were denser here, daylight was fading quickly, and I had to have made a wrong turn or missed a turn at some point. At first, I didn't panic because I thought I could still find my way, but as I kept walking, I realized I didn't recognize anything. The path was barely a trail now, just some faint markings in the dirt that I could barely follow. My phone had no signal, and when I tried calling for help, it just showed that dreaded no service message. It was already getting darker, and I wasn't sure where I was anymore. Right as it was getting dark, I saw an old shack up ahead of me. It looked abandoned, like it hadn't been used in years, but it also didn't look like it had fallen apart. The door was slightly open, and nobody was inside, so I decided to go in. It seemed like a strange thing to find out here, but at that point, I didn't have many options. I figured I could use it for shelter for the night until morning when I could see the woods better. The shack was small, with old wooden walls. There was some broken furniture, a dusty table, and a few old crates scattered around on the carpet that covered the ground. It wasn't much, but it was better than sitting outside in the dark. I locked the door behind me and settled into the corner with my bag as a pillow, lying on top of the carpet so that I had at least a little padding. Around midnight, I began hearing noises. It was faint, but there were noises now and then coming from below the shack. At first, I thought an animal had made its home under the shack, but as the night went on, I heard a lot of different noises, some louder scrapes, or just overall rustling around. I was confused, but tried to ignore the faint noises as I drifted in and out of sleep throughout the night. It all came together for me when suddenly I heard loud steps ascending towards me in the middle of the night. There was a lower level below me, like a bunker in the ground. As the steps worked their way towards me, I felt a slight push below. I realized I was laying right over the entrance to down below, which must have been a trap door below the carpet that I was laying on. I shouted out hello, kind of out of instinct, and didn't know what else to do. Whoever was below me trying to open the door frantically ran back down the stairs. A few moments later, I heard someone scrambling away into the woods, making a lot of noise as they went. I was a little worried that the person might come back, but I wasn't going to find the trail in the middle of the night, so I stayed. I spent the rest of the night huddled up in the shack, hoping that the morning would come soon. In the morning, before I left the shack, I tried to open the trap door below the carpet, but it was locked, and I couldn't find any other entrance to the bunker below me. There had to be another entrance because whoever was down there had taken off into the woods earlier that night from a different exit, but it was well hidden because I didn't see it. I made my way back to the hiking trail easily. It was easier to figure out where I was going in the daylight, and after a few hours, I was back at the parking lot. I immediately reported what I had found to the authorities, but when they asked for the details on the location, I couldn't give them an exact spot. The area was so far off the main trail, and I didn't really know where it was. I don't know if the authorities ever even looked for the shack and bunker, or if they ever found it. Maybe they didn't take me seriously, or figured it was nothing to worry about. To this day, though, I question myself why someone needed a hidden bunker below an old wooden shack in the middle of the woods for. It must have been some sort of extreme doomsday prep type of person, or someone who was up to no good.